Chapter 136. The hitman June had a bit of a donkey's temper. If you flatter him, then you can say whatever you want. But if you insist on being tough, then the hitman June won't let you get away with it. You can be unreasonable, but I'll be even more unreasonable. Perhaps this was the biggest weakness in his character. She pointed at Yigu Han's nose and lectured him. Then, she ignored Yigu Han's angry face and turned to look at Dugu Xiaoyi. With a helpless expression, she said, "I say, Miss Dugu, isn't your little white too easy to trick?" "No, I didn't provoke him at all, and he just rushed towards me. Last time, even if I'm handsome and lovable, does a Xian beast like you even know what a handsome man is?" Chu Yang thought to himself. This young master wants to catch him and stew him in a pot, but he's so small and doesn't have much meat. Little White was comfortably lying in June Mo's arms. His throat was emitting a soft, hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo sound. This was the sound he would make when he was at his happiest. He opened his warm and satisfied eyes to look at June Mo's body. Then, he closed his eyes again, and continued to revel in the feeling. He didn't know that his closest and kindest friend was planning to stew him in a pot. Dugu Xiaoyi was in a state of infinite bashfulness. She had just heard June Moxie call her little girl in a very intimate manner, and had even said, "This is between me and this little girl. What is going on between me and him?" The little girl suddenly became bashful again. "He even talked about Little White with me." Her heart was beating very fast. But after a while, she finally realized that this guy actually wanted to stew her Little White. "What did you just say?" She glared angrily at June Moxie. Her small hands clenched into fists, and she looked fiercely at June Moxie. She suddenly felt that this guy was asking for a beating. "Ah, eldest young lady, please don't hit me again. Your father and your 7 brothers have destroyed the entire June family. Not even a single roof tile can cover their heads. They've already beaten me to a crisp on the outside and tender on the inside. I don't look like a human anymore." June Moxie cupped his hands in obeisance, and leaned against the palanquin as if he didn't have a single bone in his body. His face was mournful, and it seemed as if he had been ravaged by the Dugu family's younger generation. He really was burnt to a crisp, and didn't look like a human anymore. But it was Dugu Xiaoyi's 7 brothers. "Oh. I know it's not your fault. I'm sorry. I'll ask my father to help you repair your house, and I'll pay for any damages." Dugu Xiaoyi felt very embarrassed. After all, she was the reason why June Moxie had been harassed by her family. Poor little girl. She only knew that her family had caused trouble for June Moxie because of her. She had imagined that her father and her 7 brothers would have made things difficult for the June family and June Moxie. Even if it wasn't as exaggerated as June Moxie had made it out to be, it shouldn't be too far off. She didn't know that her 7 brothers were still bedridden by June Moxie. And her troublemaker father had also been extorted by June Moxie, even though he hadn't paid the bill yet. "It's nothing. Ah, you can't be blamed for this. Your father probably didn't understand the situation." June Moxie magnanimously waved his hand. "I'm a junior, so I'll just bear with it for a while. After all, our families have been friends for generations. How many years of deep affection do we have? Do we really have to cross swords and spears?" Dugu Xiaoyi nodded vigorously. Her pretty eyes were shining. She said with a satisfied face, "Actually, you don't have to care too much about my feelings. There are some things you don't have to mistreat yourself too much." She stuttered these 2 sentences. When she finished, her face had already turned as red as a burning cloud, almost to her neck. Poor little girl. She had completely misunderstood the direction. She instinctively thought that June Moxie was enduring the abuse of his father and brothers for her. When she thought of this, the little girl suddenly felt sweet as if she had eaten honey. She didn't know how she thought about it, but she automatically thought of this aspect. June Moxie was very kind and righteous. He said, "It's what I should do, what I should do." Dugu Xiaoyi became even more bashful. She unconsciously drew circles on the ground with the tip of her toes. She tilted her head, and her face was blushing. Her big eyes flickered as she secretly looked at June Moxie. Her heart was filled with infinite satisfaction. It was as if she was saying, "I'm very happy that you can do this." These two people were like a couple. Yi Guhan couldn't stand it anymore. He let out a long sigh. He couldn't imagine that there was someone in this world who could be so shameless. June Moxie, you're too shameless, aren't you? Yi Guhan pointed at June Moxie. He really wanted to beat this guy to death. The 7 brothers of the Dugu family suffered a great loss in your hands. How can you say such things now? Ah! How is that possible? Dugu Xiaoyi cried out in shock. She looked at June Moxie in disbelief. There's no such thing. June Moxie denied flatly. He was deliberately stirring up trouble and sowing discord. Yi Guhan, you're a dignified Tian Xian expert. How could you fabricate such a rumor to deceive Miss Dugu? Humph, it's impossible. How fierce are those 7 people? How can I deal with them? How can I deal with them? What are you trying to do by distorting the truth? He couldn't admit it at this critical moment. He couldn't admit it even if he was beaten to death. If Dugu Xiaoyi were to flip out at him, it was better to leave. Dugu Xiaoyi looked at Yi Guhan in confusion. Miss Dugu, you'll know when you go home. Yi Guhan was unmoved. He looked at June Moxie coldly. Miss Dugu, it's late at night. We'd better hurry on our way. I have to go back to protect the princess. Dugu Xiaoyi was hesitant. It wasn't easy to see June Moxie, and the atmosphere was so good. She was reluctant to leave. However, Yi Guhan's sudden interruption made the little girl more worried about the situation at home. She knew Yi Guhan's character very well. Yi Guhan wasn't the kind of person who would speak without thinking. However, June Moxie's ability didn't seem to be enough to deal with her brothers. Little White, come to Big Sister. Big Sister will take you home. Dugu Xiaoyi clapped her hands and walked over to June Moxie. Smelling the faint scent on June Moxie's body, she couldn't help but blush. June Moxie hurriedly picked up the leopard and handed it to Dugu Xiaoyi. The little guy didn't resist this time. He just looked at June Moxie with a pitiful expression. At this moment, a question popped up in June Moxie's mind. Why is this leopard so attached to me? I've never seen him before. Logically speaking, this was something that did not make sense at all. There's no such thing as unreasonable in this world. There must be something that I haven't thought of. Something that only I have and others don't. Could it be because of the exquisite Hengjun Pagoda and the art of unlocking heaven's fortune? This thought flashed through June Moxie's mind like lightning. This is the only explanation. June Moxie, I'll go and find you tomorrow, okay? Dugu Xiaoyi lowered her head and held the leopard in her arms. She found an excuse for herself. Little White really likes you. If he can't see you, he will be very unhappy. I don't want him to be unhappy. Dugu Xiaoyi's pink neck drooped down as she finished speaking. She didn't know why she had said these words. Moreover, the reason she had given him was truly too lousy. All right. June Moxie thought for a moment, and then readily agreed. Tomorrow, I'll help you coax him and make him behave. Tomorrow, we'll play with him together. Dugu Xiaoyi was overjoyed. It's a deal. It's a deal. June Moxie looked at the little guy with bad intentions. He laughed in his heart. Little thing, I'm going to use you as an experiment tomorrow. Ha! The little guy in Dugu Xiaoyi's arms suddenly felt a chill all over its body. Its soft white fur stood up. It looked around vigilantly, but there were no enemies. Then, it lowered its head in confusion. If it could speak, it would definitely ask, what's going on? Why is my hair standing on end? Is it because I'm wearing too little? I only have this much fur. Dugu Xiaoyi looked back at every step as she walked away. Jun Mo Xia wasn't in the mood to stay outside any longer. So, he quickly returned to his residence. Third uncle, third uncle. When Jun Mo Xia returned, the first thing he did was to run into Jun Wuyi's courtyard. But as soon as he entered the door, he was hit by the stench. He covered his nose and came out. What's that smell? Jun Wuyi walked out slowly. He wouldn't sit in a wheelchair when there were no outsiders. He was tired of it after sitting in a wheelchair for 10 years. Third Master Jun's eyes were deep. I want those children back. Children? Which children? Jun Moxie stuttered. We found a total of 45 boys and girls who were released by us. I've tidied up the empty warehouse and placed them there temporarily. As for the children with deformities, I have 39 of them with me. I'm trying to use mystic chi to unblock their tendons and meridians to see if there's any hope of helping them recover. I hope they can live like ordinary people. Jun Moxie was shocked. Jun Wuyi's eyes were deep. Mo Xia, you are very purposeful. Moreover, you are too utilitarian. However, you must remember that the cultivation of our family's power is our top priority. It's understandable for us to be strict or even cruel. But as long as they are from the Jun family, we have an obligation to be responsible for them. This includes food, clothing, housing, and the sick. In addition, we can't be kind, but we can't abandon them. Jun Wuyi put his hands behind his back. His eyes were filled with pain. He looked at the house behind him. Just like these children, we can't ignore them. Jun Wuyi said this resolutely. There was no room for doubt. He thought of his 10 years of disability and looked at these children. He couldn't help but sympathize with them. Even if they can't do anything, as long as we can afford to support them, it doesn't matter. Chapter 137. To be honest, Jun Dashao had always been an assassin. Calmness, cold-bloodedness, and even cold-bloodedness were common to him. At most, he would only take care of those who were genuinely good to him. In his previous life, the only ones who could be included in this list were his master and a few close brothers. As for this life, it was limited to Grandpa Jun and Jun Wuyi. Even his nominal sister-in-law, Guan Qinghan, was not included in the hitman's list of close friends. Jun Dashao may be compassionate towards those who were in distress, but when it came to taking care of them for the rest of their lives, he would politely decline. Of course, there is a limit to kindness. If one day, we are unable to take care of ourselves, then I may be the first to abandon this group of people. But when we have the ability, we must do our best. There is no other reason. People don't need a reason to save people. Jun Wuyi's words weren't disguised in the slightest. However, Jun Mo Xia could feel his determination. A person may need a reason to harm others, but a person does not need a reason to save others. If you have the ability to do good deeds, but don't do it, then you are naturally cold-blooded. But if you don't have the ability to do good deeds, then you will only be consigned to eternal damnation. Jun Moxie certainly understood this truth, and he understood it even more than Jun Wuyi. By the way, why are you in such a hurry to look for me? Jun Wuyi turned his head and asked. It's like this, I need a group of Xian beasts, from low level to high level. It would be best if there are level 8 Xian beasts. Jun Moxie smiled. Level 8? Have you woken up from your dream? Where do you expect me to find one for you? Jun Wuyi was both angry and amused as he looked at his nephew. Don't even mention level 8, even lower level Xian beasts may not be able to exchange for them. Level 4 or 5 Xian beasts may be in good condition, but level 5 or 6 Xian beasts may be lucky enough to be able to exchange for them, but their bodies will certainly be disabled. As for level 7 and above, don't even dream about it. Only low-level Xian beasts? That's not a problem. Those should be enough. Right, if there's a 5th or 6th grade dark beast, even if it's crippled, it doesn't matter as long as it's alive. Send it to me as well. June Moxie pondered for a moment before speaking readily. I want it tomorrow morning. Understood, I will arrange it immediately. Jun Wui did not hesitate and did not even ask June Moxie what these Xian beasts were for. After all, this was a huge expenditure. A 5th or 6th level Xian beast, even if it was a crippled one, would still cost a considerable sum. Thank you, third uncle, said June Moxie seriously. Well, you can go back first. I still have some work to do. The sooner we can save them, the more hope we have. At least, we can reduce their pain. Jun Wui's face showed a trace of fatigue. I will accompany third uncle to take a look. June Moxie stepped inside. The 39 children in the room had obviously been washed more than once. Their beds and bedding were snow white. However, this couldn't conceal the pungent stench. It was obvious that some of the dirt had seeped into their skin, and some had even seeped into their bones. This wasn't something that could be washed off in a short period of time. These children were all skin and bones, and they were as thin as a match. These 39 children had one thing in common: their hands and feet were deformed, and their tongues were cut off. In fact, more than 20 of them had been pierced in their ears, and they were truly deaf and mute. June Moxie sighed. His heart was filled with a monstrous rage towards the mastermind behind the Huanghua Hall. Such conduct cannot be tolerated by the heavens. If I discover anything, I will repay them 10-fold or 100-fold. These children had already eaten their meals, and their complexions looked much better. At least, they looked a little more rosy and full of vitality. The children knew that these two were their saviors when they saw them come in. Although they couldn't speak, their eyes were filled with gratitude. Children were like this, they would naturally feel grateful if you treated them well. June Moxie revealed a gentle smile for the first time in his 2 lives. He comforted these pitiful children, and began to examine the children in detail from the one closest to him. His examination speed was obviously much faster than Jun Wui's. After a long time, June Moxie stood up with a heavy expression on his face. He winked at Jun Wui, and the 2 of them walked out together. A few of them can't be saved. June Moxie gritted his teeth. 3 of them have their bones rusted. Their lower body and waist bones have rotted. It's only a matter of time before they die. Even if we have elixirs, we can't do anything about it. Although they can still breathe now, they definitely won't be able to hold on for more than half a month. And it's going to be an extremely painful and torturous half a month. Jun Wui clenched his fists tightly. There are also quite a number of people whose bones and meridians in their hands and feet are completely necrotic. They can never recover. They can only live with deformities for the rest of their lives. June Moxie lowered his voice. Among these people, there are another 12 people. If we amputate their lower limbs from the waist down, they might still be able to live. But, for the rest of their lives, they won't have the ability of a man or a woman. Jun Wui let out a long sigh. His expression was cold and hard. As for the rest, although they are also deformities, it's not very serious because they haven't been deformities for a long time, or because of some other reasons. After a period of good nursing, break and destroy the joints of their hands and feet once, and then carefully treat them to regrow. Then, supplement with medicine to speed up the growth process. Before the regrowth is fixed, break it again, and then use mystical energy to wash their meridians. If we do this twice, maybe they can recover to the same state as a normal person. To do this kind of nursing, the cost of any one of them is no less than 10,000 taels of silver. Moreover, there's no guarantee of the final outcome of the treatment. Actually, these concerns are secondary. The most difficult hurdle is the 2 broken bones. It's not just a simple fracture. Under the condition that the meridians are not damaged, every part of the bones has to be broken, scattered, and regrowth. During this process, the patient has to suffer great pain. June Moxie's gaze was deep. It's not something an ordinary person can endure. there's a possibility of dying from the pain. And, even if they really recover, they can only have 60% of a normal person's physical strength for the rest of their lives. This is already the most optimistic estimate. Jun Wui sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Jun Wui had complete faith in his nephew's medical skills. So, he didn't doubt his judgment. Even if he was lucky enough to save a few of these people, it didn't mean that they would be able to live like ordinary people. In fact, living was already a kind of suffering for them. If third uncle really wants to save them, I'll say this first. I said that treating each person will cost 10,000 taels of silver. But, that's only the most conservative estimate. Moreover, I didn't include the cost of their later recuperation. That's because the cost of the treatment won't be low. But, it can't be compared to the cost of nursing their bodies. That's because their bodily functions have already fallen to the lowest point. Therefore, the medicine needed to nurse them will be extremely expensive and indispensable. And, the cost of the above treatment will be at least 50,000 taels of silver by the time they are able to recover to the state of a normal person. And, I believe that this number will be an astronomical figure for any ordinary family. And, the combination of these people will reach an even more astonishing level. Third uncle, I don't know if you've seriously considered all of this. I know that our Jun family's wealth isn't small. But, third uncle, you have to be clear about this matter. Moreover, you have to consider this matter from the Jun family's perspective. Once this matter starts, and we destroy each and every one of these nests of evil, there will be more and more of these pitiful people. Should we save them or not? If we really want to save them all, then I believe that the insignificant Jun family, even the entire Tianxiang kingdom doesn't have the financial resources to bear this astronomical figure. If third uncle insists on taking responsibility, then there will only be one outcome. And, there will only be one outcome. And, that is, the Jun family will be destroyed along with these people. I don't object to third uncle doing good deeds out of kindness, but the problem with this matter has to end here. This cannot be allowed to happen again. Following Jun Moxie's calm, callous, and almost cold-blooded analysis, Jun Wui's complexion gradually became heavy. In fact, he even became somewhat dispirited. Good things are hard to do. Jun Moxie sighed deeply. If these children were in his previous world, perhaps a large family like the Jun family could call upon the society to set up a charity fund. Or, perhaps, an orphanage or something like that would be able to provide for them. But, in this world, under this feudal monarchical system, was this even possible? The answer was undoubtedly no. Let's not talk about whether or not the other large families would respond to this embarrassing matter of putting in money and effort without getting anything in return. Just the fact that the Jun family would be able to attract the support of the people was enough to make the imperial family restless. Under such a feudal system, doing too many evil deeds would certainly lead to one's death. But, doing too much good deeds would also bring about a disaster. Let's do as you say. This cannot be allowed to happen again. Tomorrow, I will arrange for people to send those boys and girls in the warehouse to their fiefdoms. As for these people, Jun Wui gritted his teeth and said, since we've already done it, there's no reason to give up halfway. I can't let them go to the Jun family without any hope. This is the only time. Alright, let's do as third uncle says. But, third uncle should make a decision as soon as possible to give those 15 people who have no hope at all. Now that they're alive, every moment they live is another moment of great pain. Being alive is already a great torture. Unfortunately, they don't have the strength to end their own lives. Killing them may seem cruel, but it's already a great relief for them. And, third uncle, please remember that this is the only time. Jun Wui nodded sadly. In addition, after the treatment, I want 2 people to stay behind. Among so many people, only 2 of them will have some unorthodox abilities. When that time comes, third uncle, don't be soft-hearted. Jun Moxie said, third uncle, I would like to ask if there are any problems with the financial income of our Jun family? I shouldn't be asking too much, but... Chapter 138. There hasn't been any war in recent years, so the June family's income has decreased a lot. At present, the fief has an annual income of nearly 2 million taels of silver. As for the rest, that's all. Jun Wui wasn't disobedient, he understood the meaning behind Jun Moxie's question, and although he felt quite helpless, but he had to say it. Only this? That's too little. Jun Moxie bluntly said, only a trifling 2 million taels of silver. I'm afraid it's not even enough to support an ordinary big family. Such a meager income is simply not enough to support a big family like the Jun family. An annual income of 2 million taels of silver may seem like a lot. For an ordinary family, it's not an exaggeration to say that it's an astronomical figure, but compared to a big family like the Jun family, it's really too little. Although there aren't many direct descendants of the Jun family, but in this big courtyard, there are more than 1,000 of them. The expenses of food, clothing, and the salaries of these people is definitely a very shocking figure. Leave the financial aspect to me for the time being. I may have a way to help the family improve. Jun Moxie paced a couple of steps, his heart secretly calculating for a moment, thinking that his wine was going to be auctioned soon. When the time comes, it shouldn't be a problem to supplement the family's living expenses. There really is no other way. I'll just have to be black-hearted for once. A cup of 10,000 taels of gold is too expensive, then I'll just have to make it more expensive. In any case, it's up to you whether you want to buy it or not. It's better for you to die than for me. Everyone understands this truth. After thinking for a moment, Jun Dashao said, as for the remaining 24 people, third uncle can carefully observe them during this time of recovery, and see what they are interested in. Maybe it'll be useful in the future. Although we've already decided to support them, but we can't just support them for a lifetime. If they have the ability to do something in the future, but don't do it, then what's the point of supporting them? People always have their own value. It has no value at all. It's just a breathing corpse. It's better to abandon it. Jun Wui nodded solemnly. What Jun Moxie said today gave Jun Wui a familiar feeling once again. That was specious, but actually wrong. There was a reason, but it still went against the natural law and human ethics. But if it was wrong, it was undeniable. Every word was biased, but it's too unconventional. Jun Wui shook his head helplessly. His nephew's way of doing things and his thoughts were completely different from the orthodox etiquette and morality, but he was more practical. Was this a good thing or a bad thing? However, the hitman Jun didn't know that the third uncle was also sighing. This third uncle was too much of a gentleman. In fact, he wasn't even qualified to be the head of the Jun family. The patriarch of a large family did not have to be completely heartless and cold, but there were things that he could do and things that he could not do. Personal sympathy and compassion couldn't be used as a basis for doing things. All behavior should be based on the family's interests. However, Jun Wui hadn't realized this yet. At best, he was still stuck at the level of an iron-blooded warrior. Jun Moxie went back to his room, but the third uncle Jun Wui didn't feel sleepy at all. He simply moved his wheelchair out, and placed a small tea table in front of him. He took out a jar of wine, and poured himself a cup of wine. The breeze was blowing, and the night was as cool as water. It was as if he had returned to the past 10 years. Jun Wui was upset at first. He thought of these pitiful children, and then thought of Jun Moxie's words. He felt even more annoyed. After a long time, his mood finally calmed down. As the saying goes, wine enters the bowels of one's bowels, and makes one feel even more depressed. He couldn't help but feel sad again. Yao Er, if you were by my side, what would you do? Would you help me make a choice? Do you know how much I miss you? Jun Wui muttered in a low voice. He raised his cup of wine, and drank it in one gulp. He didn't say a word. The cool moonlight hung high in the sky, and its faint radiance sprinkled on his body. The surroundings became quiet. The chirping of insects, the weeping of the wind. Jun Moxie returned to his courtyard. Two black-clothed men had been waiting for him for a long time. "Young master, this is a messenger pigeon from the Ni Chang Pavilion." One of the black-clothed men bowed and said. "Young master, this is a messenger pigeon from the Ni Chang Pavilion." The black-clothed man smiled and said, "It wasn't hurt, right?" June Moxie took the pigeon and looked at it. "Young master has already instructed us to not harm it. If we let go now, this carrier pigeon will still be able to fly far away. I believe it won't take too much time to reach the place it wants to go." The black-clothed man smiled and said confidently. June Moxie nodded and gently untied a small bamboo tube from the pigeon's leg. He then took out a roll of crumpled paper. "Within a month, the June family's Mo must be killed. The two of us cannot coexist." There was only a short sentence written on the paper. The handwriting was very sloppy, and it was obvious that the person who wrote this was very excited. It was signed with a small U character. Haha, this woman is too narrow-minded. Is there a need to be like this? With such a temperament, it will be difficult for her to achieve great things. June Moxie smiled and shook his head in disdain. The two black-clothed men's faces twitched at the same time. For any woman, wouldn't it be enough to want to kill someone after encountering such a situation? Especially for a proud and beautiful woman who has Xian Qi. She doesn't even seem to be a pure woman. If we release this pigeon, can we track it? June Moxie waved the paper in his hand. "We can't track it." The black-clothed man looked embarrassed. "This kind of pigeon is very good at flying long distances and is extremely tenacious. We can only capture or kill it when it first takes off. At other times, our strength is limited and we can't do anything about it." "Oh, then it's fine." June Mo Xia carefully returned the paper to its original state and stuffed it back into the bamboo tube. Then, he carefully examined the paper to make sure that it was folded and tied in the same manner as Lady Yu. Then, he used the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune to erase any trace of his aura. Then, he said, "All right, let it fly." The black-clothed man took the pigeon and turned to leave. June Moxie smiled as the night wind gently brushed his cheeks. "Put down the rat trap and wait for the big mouse. Spread the net, who can escape?" Ha ha. This night was destined to be an unusual one for the Tianxiang city. In the silent night, there would be people flying up from time to time with different profound chi radiances of gold, silver, white, and yellow, flashing and disappearing, as lively as fireworks. Countless pairs of eyes were vigilantly watching the dark imperial city. Everyone's ears were listening for even the slightest movement in the wind. Occasionally, two groups of people would bump into each other. A single word of disagreement would lead to a bloody battle to the death. Then, they would retreat, leaving behind bloodstains, broken limbs, and corpses. The secret forces of the Li family, the Meng family, the Song family, and the Murong family had all mobilized a considerable part of their forces to monitor something at all times. Even if it was a hooligan in the streets, if he accidentally said something sensitive, he would instantly be invited to a tea party. The peak level 9 Xian Dan had undoubtedly stirred the hearts of the world's Xian experts. Only the Dugu and Jun families remained motionless. Another strange thing was that the Xian Dan had been stolen from the Tang family. But, the Tang family had been the most patient of all the families. Not only had they not sent people to investigate, but the Tang family's members had also been recalled. Moreover, they had issued strict orders that no one was allowed to go out at will. In the darkness of the night, 8 black shadows flew over. They faced the tall city walls as if they were walking on flat ground. They entered the city without a sound. Then, they stealthily entered the Li family's residence. In the north of the Tianxiang city, the sound of wheels rolling could be heard. A group of people was quietly advancing towards the Tianxiang city at full speed. Among this group of people, there were actually quite a few luxurious carriages, and the horses pulling the carriages were incomparably handsome. They were much taller than ordinary horses, and there were actually 2 sharp horns on their foreheads. Their 4 legs were faintly covered in scales. Obviously, these weren't ordinary horses. Instead, they were special Xian beasts. Every single carriage in this group of carriages was pulled by 4 of these dark beasts, and their speed was extremely swift. Even the steeds that galloped on the battlefield would probably be unable to keep up with them. But, they were only making light noises. In the first carriage. 6th grandfather, we don't know if the Xian Dan's matter is true or not. But, we've come from thousands of miles away. Isn't this making a big fuss over a minor issue? Besides, the Tianxiang city has 6th uncle and Uncle Mu. Uncle Mu. Moreover, the 9th elder is keeping watch. How could such a formidable force escape their grasp? The person who spoke didn't sound very old, and his voice carried the sharpness of a teenager. It was obvious that he was filled with impatience. Feng Wu, this matter is related to a peak level 9 Xian Dan. So, we have to be careful. You're still inexperienced. So, you don't know about this. A few days ago, the 9th elder sent a message saying that a peak Xian expert had appeared. Then, the news of a level 9 Xian Dan came out. This is enough to prove the authenticity of this matter. But, I'm worried that we won't be able to obtain the Xian Dan even if we all arrive. After all, it's a peak Xian expert. So, there's no guarantee that we'll be able to obtain the Xian Dan. An old voice sounded. Who in the world dares to oppose our Silver Blizzard City? What's more, the 3rd elder will be accompanying us this time, along with you, 6th grandpa. Even if it's a peak spirit Xian expert, there's still the 9th elder who has already made arrangements there. Moreover, there's also the geographical advantage. I believe that we'll be able to obtain the Xian core. 6th grandpa is worrying too much. The young man's voice was full of lofty arrogance. It seemed as if being born in the Silver Blizzard City was already an extraordinary thing. Boy, don't blame me for calling you a frog at the bottom of a well. Do you know how many experts there are in this world? Our Silver Blizzard City may be strong enough to look down on the world, but we can't be careless. The old man sighed. There was a hint of pride in his voice as he continued, but, there are very few things in this world that are worthy of the 3rd elder and the 9th elder's attention. I remember that the last time was 10 years ago. Time really makes one grow old, this saying is true. Chapter 139. When the youngster next to her heard the words little princess, his eyes lit up. The moonlight shone on his face, revealing a bit of longing and fascination. This youngster had been pursuing this outstanding beauty and noble temperament for a long time. In the middle carriage, there was a girl dressed in snow-white clothes. She was about 16 or 17 years old. Her features were picturesque, and her beauty was indescribable. However, there was a hint of cleverness in her eyes. It was obvious that she was not a law-abiding character, and was probably extremely mischievous. At this time, she was shaking the arm of an old man with snow-white hair and beard in the carriage. "Third Grandpa, you're talking about the most important part. Why don't you continue? Don't keep me in suspense." The old man was still pretending to be dead with his eyes closed. His old face was wrinkled like an old eggplant, and he was crying in his heart. "I've finally experienced the fierceness of this little princess." No wonder those old fellows heaved a long sigh of relief when they found out that I was accompanying the little princess down the mountain. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. Then, they looked at me with sympathy, pity, and even schadenfreude in their eyes. "I say, little princess, ever since you left the Silver City, I've been telling you stories all the way until now. During the day, I've been telling you stories until the stars filled the sky. At night, I've been telling you stories until Dongfang shines. I've also been telling you stories when we're eating. Even when the dragon-scaled horses are resting. Little princess, Third Grandpa has just come out of seclusion. It's been decades since I roamed the world. How can I remember so many stories? Can you let these old bones of mine go?" The old man wanted to cry but had no tears. If he had known that this little princess had such a temper, he would have quit this errand no matter what. I really despise myself. When I first received the news, I was excited to go out for a stroll. Now, it seems that this is not a stroll. This is clearly tormenting my old bones until they fall apart. Who asked you to suddenly shut up at the critical moment? You're keeping me in suspense. The little princess pouted her lips in dissatisfaction. Then, she started to sway and act like a spoiled child. Third gong gong, hurry up and continue. That June family, that June Wui, what happened to them after that? Also, eldest sister, their love story is so beautiful and touching, the third elder groaned in his stomach. This matter was a taboo in the Silver City, and no one dared to talk about it lightly. He had talked until his throat was parched, and he had been cornered by this little she-devil. So, he had inadvertently said a few words. Only a few words. Who would have thought that this little she-devil would stick to this matter after that? She had been chattering non-stop, and had kept asking about it until now. The old man wanted to cry a little. From last night until tonight, it had already been 15 to 16 hours, sixth brother. Come over here and tell the little princess a story. This old man will swap places with you. I will owe you a favor as your big brother. The third elder had no choice but to propose a swap. All right, remember that you owe me a big favor. That night, this old man suddenly found a ghost. Its tongue was long, and blood was dripping from it. I will tell the little princess about it. The sixth elder was not to be trifled with. Ah. No. No no no. Sixth gong gong, don't come over. I only want third gong gong to tell me. Before he could finish, the little princess had already cried out in alarm, and hurriedly refused. Third brother, you see, it's not that I don't want to give you face. It's just that the little princess won't let me go over. Ha ha ha. Third brother, take your time to tell me. Don't forget that you owe me a big favor. And, making the little princess happy will be a great merit for you. This little brother will go to sleep first. The sixth elder laughed heartily, and then went silent. Despicable. Shameless. No sense of brotherhood. How dare you call yourself my brother? The third elder cursed angrily. Third gong gong, could it be that you hate Shui? The little princess's eyes glistened with tears, and she seemed to be on the verge of crying. Of course not, of course not. The third elder flatly denied. I feel sorry for Shui, hee. Then quickly tell me a story. Tell me the story of my sister and Jun Wui. If you don't tell me, then it means that you hate Shui. The little princess's anger immediately turned into joy, and she beamed with joy. The third elder almost fainted from holding his breath. What a sin. What kind of debt did I owe in my entire life? The wheels rolled on, and the little princess was in high spirits. Her fighting spirit was high, and she couldn't stop chattering along the way. She was extremely curious. The third elder, even though he was a master like Shinxian, couldn't stand it anymore. The wrinkles on his old face became deeper, and his spirit became more and more dispirited. The group was getting closer and closer to Tianxiang City. In another direction, there was also a group of people on horseback heading towards Tianxiang City. Imperial Tutor, I'm afraid that the Xian Dan incident is still unknown. You're risking your life like this, it's not worth it. The one who spoke was a man dressed in black riding on a horse. His figure was thin, and his face was rigid. Just by looking at his face, one could tell that he was filled with the bitterness of war. This trip seems to be fraught with danger, but Yu Tang and Tianxiang have been living in harmony all these years. There shouldn't be too much of a problem. From an official point of view, we're going to enjoy the treatment of a state guest. Besides, the three princes of Tianxiang are currently in a heated argument. We should add fuel to the fire, and fish in troubled waters in order to benefit from it. Moreover, I believe that no one will be able to stop me from leaving Tianxiang even if there are some people who are equally matched with me in terms of martial arts. An old man dressed in a white robe had his hands in his sleeves. His face was tall and thin, and his spirit was hale and hearty. His demeanor was relaxed. On the other hand, you're the one who's taking the greatest risk in escorting me to Tianxiang City. You've been at war with the Jun family for many years, and we're mortal enemies. Moreover, almost all of the Jun family's descendants have died fighting with you. I'm afraid that your situation is far more dangerous than mine. How is it dangerous? If the Jun family takes advantage of this opportunity to gather their forces against me, then they're not fit to be my enemy. The middle-aged man's callous face was calm and carefree as he smiled. Moreover, even I won in a daze over what happened back then. But, one thing is certain, those people from the Jun family didn't die by my hands. In all fairness, I'm no match for any one of the three brothers of the Jun family. A look of humiliation suddenly appeared on his face as he said this. He then angrily said, the three brothers of Jun Wuhui can be said to be the enemies that I admire the most in my life. I admit that I'm not as good as them. Even if I were to die by Jun Wuhui's hands, I wouldn't have a single complaint. It's still better than this. Those victories were obtained in such an inexplicable manner. Such victories are a great humiliation for me. This time, I'm going to Tianxiang to escort the imperial preceptor. Secondly, and most importantly, I want to find out how Jun Wuhui died. If his death was caused by someone, then I'll avenge him even if I'm his enemy. The black-clothed middle-aged man's knife-like face revealed anger and grief. Such a heroic man shouldn't have died because of a conspiracy. That's up to you. The imperial preceptor smiled meaningfully. I know that you've been suspecting me all these years, and that I've been acting in secret, right? Shouldn't I be suspicious? If there's anyone who can plot against the Jun Wuhui brothers, I believe that the imperial preceptor can't be a second person. The black-clothed middle-aged man suddenly turned his head, and his eagle-like eyes looked straight at the imperial preceptor's face. You're a frog at the bottom of a well. There are many capable people in this world. Everything will be proven by the facts. The imperial tutor's expression was tranquil as he met his gaze. To tell you the truth, Jun Wuhui's death, although I did intend to take action at that time, and even went there myself, it was not me who did it. Humph. The black-clothed middle-aged man's face was filled with humiliation as he shouted, "This is a war between soldiers, why are you meddling in other people's business?" He paused for a moment, and then suddenly roared, "Who asked you to meddle in other people's business?" The imperial preceptor was silent for a long time, and then said, "Zhao Jianhun, some things are not just a matter of soldiers. For the country, for the family, for people, for themselves, this is child's play." After saying this, he looked at the dark night ahead, and didn't say another word. Zhao Jianhun, this black-clothed middle-aged man, turned out to be the Yutang Empire's #1 general, and the sworn enemy of the three brothers, Jun Wuhui, Jun Wumeng, and Jun Wuyi. Zhao Jianhun smiled arrogantly, and said in a low voice, "Jun Wuhui and Jun Wumeng are dead, but the third brother, Jun Wuyi, is still alive, and sooner or later, I will see the light of day again. I will never accept such a humiliating victory. All these years, these 4 consecutive inexplicable victories have really driven me crazy. Do you know?" Zhao Jianhun looked up to the sky and sighed. In another direction. There was also another country's border, and there was also a large group of people rushing over. And this direction belonged to the Shenxia Empire. In the distant prairie, a middle-aged man dressed in a black robe was proudly standing in the middle of the prairie, and a small sparrowhawk was flying from his hand. His hands were gently folded behind his back, and his calm face was smiling. Level 9 Peak Xian Dan. It's really a good thing, even if it's not for the Xian Dan, to be able to exchange blows with the world's heroes is also a great thing in life. This middle-aged man was tall and straight, with slender legs, and a face that seemed ordinary, but exuded a captivating charm. His long hair wasn't restrained at all, and was naturally hanging down loosely, making his whole person look full of demonic charm. He was standing there quietly, but it seemed as if he was accepting the worship of tens of thousands of creatures in the prairie. It was as if a demon king had suddenly emerged from the thick black fog, and was proudly overlooking the world. If you are a flood dragon, you will overturn the rivers and seas. If you are an eagle, you will fight in the sky. Tianxiang City, I, the solitary eagle, am coming. This man was known as the eagle god of the prairie, and he looked up to the sky and roared, and with this long roar, the sky above the prairie suddenly became turbulent. At the same time, there were also countless sporadic people, some in groups of 3, some in groups of 5, but the most were only a dozen people, and there were even countless people who came alone, and there was only one goal, Tianxiang City. Many people had gathered in Tianxiang City. At the same time, in the distant and mysterious Tianfa forest, there were all kinds of flying xian beasts flying around at lightning speed, and suddenly, the quiet Tianfa forest began to fluctuate, and a tyrannical spirit continued to surge over the entire forest, and didn't stop for a long time. It seemed that not only the human world, but even the Tianfa forest, which was far away from the human world, was also experiencing some unusual changes due to some unknown reasons. After a long time, a roar shook the sky. Level 9 peak Xian Dan, how could it fall into the hands of a Xian warrior? That is the greatest shame for us. An overwhelming pressure suddenly surged between the heavens and the earth, and the hundreds of millions of creatures in the Tianfa forest couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 140. The sky had just begun to brighten, and Jun Dashao had already completed today's physical training. His robust upper body was covered in sweat. Dashao casually wiped the sweat off his body, put on a long gown, and walked towards the warehouse. Jun Mo Xia wasn't willing to send the 40 or so boys and girls that his third uncle had rescued to his fief. Jun Mo Xia wasn't like the third master Jun's gentlemanly way of doing things. Giving a favor without expecting anything in return wasn't the hitman Jun's character. I've put in the effort, paid the price, and also bear the risk. In return, you must show me the corresponding value. Even if the Jun family has food to eat, and absolutely no one will starve to death, but this food must be exchanged with your own strength and wisdom. Reaping without sowing must not be fantasized about. Don't think that we'll help you to the end just because we were kind enough to save you, and feed you for the rest of your life. We have no obligation to feed you. Even if a meat pie really falls from the sky, one's head must be hard enough, and one's hands must be flexible enough to catch it, and not get smashed to death. Therefore, Jun Moxie wanted to see if there was anyone worthy of training, and his requirements weren't high, 1 or 2 would be enough. After all, the valuable boys and girls should have already been picked by the owner of the Hall of Huanghua. After half an hour, Jun Moxie came out with a disappointed look on his face. Unsurprisingly, the reason why the Hall of Huanghua had given up on training these boys and girls was not without reason. Whether it was their brains or their bones, they were obviously not made for practicing martial arts. Of course, they were also not made for practicing Xian Qi. Therefore, Jun Moxie could only choose to give up. If a group of people with no talent were to be forced to practice and then fight, then not only would it be a waste of time and effort, but it would also be a waste of money and resources. Moreover, it would only force them to die earlier, which would go against the original intention of saving them. These people should be like ordinary people, working at sunrise, and resting at sunset, following the will of the heavens. A large group of people had gathered at the entrance of the Jun residence. Third Master Jun Wui may have been disabled for many years, but he was still a celebrity in Tianxiang City. Moreover, he was also a powerful and influential figure. So, now that Third Master Jun had spread the news that he wanted to purchase a batch of Xian beasts, wouldn't anyone who had the money flock to him? Therefore, when the gatekeeper of the Jun family opened the gate, he was startled to see the surging crowd outside. In fact, this kind of thing wasn't uncommon 7 or 8 years ago. At that time, third Master Jun Wui had been crippled. Old Master Jun had spared no effort to look for famous doctors and experts to treat Jun Wui. He had also bought a lot of rare treasures and rare playthings. He had even bought a lot of books and toys in the hope that Jun Wui would have something to rely on. Although third Master Jun had long been disheartened, he couldn't bear to disappoint his father's kind intentions. So, he had reluctantly bribed him. However, Grandpa Jun and his son were sensible people. So, after a few times, they understood each other's intentions. However, this time, third Master Jun had taken the initiative to spread the word that he wanted to purchase Xian beasts. Therefore, a large number of merchants in Tianxiang City had flocked to him. Jun Wui sat upright in his wheelchair as he slowly walked out. He understood Jun Moxie's intentions. If Jun Moxie only wanted Xian beasts, then he wouldn't have needed his third uncle's help. He could have done it himself. Since this matter was being handled through him, then it could only mean one thing: Jun Moxie didn't want this matter to be known by others. At least, he didn't want others to know that it was Jun Dashao who wanted Xian beasts. His nephew's actions were always unexpected. However, he had to admit that Jun Dashao didn't say much, but his words always hit the nail on the head. Moreover, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that his words were reasonable. He was truly unfathomable. Jun Wui was naturally very concerned about this matter. Therefore, he personally came out to select the Xian beasts. From the 1st to the 5th level, he deliberately selected 2 of the best quality Xian beasts for each level. As for the rest, he sent them back. It wasn't that he didn't want the 6th level Xian beasts, but that there wasn't a single 6th level Xian beast in the entire Tianxiang City. Even if they were defective, there was no market for them. Jun Wui waved his hand, and ordered people to carry the cages containing the Xian beasts into his courtyard. By the time Jun Moxie arrived, the 10 Xian beasts had already been cleaned by the Jun family servants. Each of them looked much more spirited. At least, they didn't look dirty or sloppy. There were 2 level 1 white Xian rabbits, 2 level 2 winged raccoons, level 3 winged wolves, level 4 barbarian bulls, and level 5 iron snakes. Jun Moxie waved his hand, and ordered the servants to leave first. Then, he stopped in front of the cage of the level 1 white Xian rabbits. The 2 rabbits didn't raise their heads or open their eyes, and simply ignored him. Rubbing his nose, Jun Moxie stood in front of the cage of the winged raccoons, but still didn't respond. Level 3, still no response. Jun Moxie began to lose confidence. Could it be that his judgment was wrong? Could it be that little white and I simply hit it off? However, giving up halfway wasn't Jun Moxie's character. He didn't have much hope, and was just about to walk towards the 4th cage when suddenly a hissing sound was heard. The 2 iron snakes at the edge of the cage suddenly stood up, raised their heads high, and stared at Jun Moxie with their small cold eyes. The 2 barbarian bulls next to the iron snakes also opened their eyes and looked at Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly stopped in his tracks. The barbarian bulls looked at him suspiciously, and then lowered their heads. Then, they raised their heads again, and looked around. Finally, they looked at Jun Moxie again, and a look of hope slowly appeared in their eyes. It seemed as if Jun Dashao was some kind of immortal grass, and in short, he was the thing that they longed for the most. The 2 iron snakes in the distance began to scuttle around in their cages, and their tails were constantly swinging back and forth. The cages began to shake unsteadily, but the eyes of the 2 snakes were still firmly fixed in the direction of Jun Moxie, and there was a look of anxiety on their faces. They believed that if they hadn't been confined by the cages, they would have already pounced on him. Jun Wui was watching from the side, and although he also noticed that something was strange, he couldn't see why this was happening. It seemed that his nephew was no different from a normal person. Jun Moxie calmly took 2 steps back, and although his face was still expressionless, his heart was already filled with ecstasy. If he still didn't understand at this point, then he was really more stupid than a pig. Whether it was the art of unlocking heaven's fortune or the exquisite Hung Jun pagoda, either one or both of them had an inexplicable effect on Xian beasts, and this effect was very big. Just this discovery alone was already a priceless treasure for Jun Moxie. What was the most dangerous place in the Xian continent? He believed that as long as this question was asked, no one would say that it was the Silver Blizzard City. Although the Silver Blizzard City was powerful and insufferably arrogant, but they wouldn't kill people for no reason. However, there was one place that would, and that was the most dangerous place in the continent. And there was no one who didn't know about this place. Everyone, even the ordinary people, would give the answer, Tian Fa Forest. The Xian beast's paradise, and the human's hell. Even if the great master Shen Xian had reached the peak of his strength, he would still be in danger of losing his life in there. But Jun Moxie wasn't afraid now. What did this mean? What was the most valuable thing in the Xian continent? High-grade medicinal herbs, miraculous healing medicines, miraculous fruits that could increase Xian Qi, Xian beasts Xian Dan, and Xian beast cubs. And where could these rare items be found the most? The answer was still, Tian Fa Forest. No one had dared to venture into this place for tens of thousands of years, so how could there be a lack of such rare treasures? Jun Mo Xia possessed a special aura that could make high-level Xian beasts fond of him. So, this aura was like a golden road for him. Moreover, it was also a road that could allow him to rapidly increase his strength. Jun Moxie didn't believe that even Xian Qi could be rapidly increased by relying on medicinal herbs and Xian Dan. Wouldn't his own art of unlocking heaven's fortune have a faster method of increasing it? As if sensing Jun Moxie's agitated emotions, the exquisite Hung Jun pagoda in his mind began to spin. This time, Jun Moxie had a strange feeling in his heart, as if he was being despised, or rather, ridiculed. It was like someone carrying a mountain made entirely of gold on his back to beg for food, and along the way, everyone was laughing at him to their heart's content. This feeling that welled up from the bottom of his heart made Jun Moxie very unhappy. Could it be that there was something wrong with my way of thinking? But Jun Moxie really didn't know that there was something wrong with his way of thinking, and it was a very big problem. In fact, he was no different from a beggar who was holding a golden rice bowl, or even worse. This #1 assassin in his previous life, a martial arts expert, was actually a standard newbie who had never come into contact with cultivation. And this standard newbie had received the blessing of the heavens, and possessed the world's #1 spiritual treasure, the exquisite Hung Jun pagoda. If this pagoda had 10,000 functions, then the one that Jun Moxie had discovered now was probably not even one. Guarding a mountain of treasures, but not knowing how to excavate them, this was the greatest tragedy. If one had to compare, then Jun Moxie wasn't just holding a golden rice bowl to beg for food, he was holding a diamond bowl, or even the most expensive bowl to beg for food. Even if he had casually read a few cultivation novels in his previous life, he probably wouldn't have had such a small harvest like this. But the only books that this great assassin had read were the works of Jin Yong. So my friends, you are very fortunate. At least more fortunate than Jun Moxie. If my brothers and sisters had been able to cross over with the Hung Jun pagoda, at least they would have been much better off than the current Jun Moxie. Therefore, the Hung Jun pagoda naturally despised him, for there were too many reasons. There were countless reasons to despise him until death. The moment the Hung Jun pagoda began to rotate, almost all the Xian beasts in the cages simultaneously became active, even the level 1, 2, and 3 Xian beasts were no exception. They stared at Jun Moxie, and constantly banged their cages, as if they couldn't wait to rush out of their cages and throw themselves into Jun Moxie's embrace. Jun Wui was inexplicably staring at this scene with his eyes wide open. What's going on? Did my nephew do something? It seems that since my nephew came here, he only walked back and forth, and didn't do anything, but why are the Xian beasts reacting so strangely? What's going on? Chapter 141. The corners of Jun Moxie's mouth hooked up into a complacent smile. He waved his hand and said, "Invite him in. And, there's another experimenter." Then, he said, "Dispose of these." He pointed at the iron cages and said, "They're no longer useful." The servants hurriedly complied. Several people quickly came over and removed the big iron cages. "These are all useless." Junwoo widened his eyes and looked at his nephew. Yes, they are indeed useless." Jun Moxie smiled as if it was a matter of course. "Third uncle can dispose of them by himself." "Ah. Third uncle, if you want to slaughter those 2 snakes and eat their meat, count me in. Those snakes are very nutritious and can nourish the body." "Slaughter them and eat their meat?" Junwoo's eyebrows twitched. He almost opened his mouth to reprimand him. These mystical beasts were bought at a huge price of several 100,000 taels of silver. Last night, I ordered them to be bought immediately. But this morning, I walked 2 steps like a military parade, and now I don't need them anymore. Especially that pair of 5th-grade iron bone snakes. They were a pair, and they were intact. I spent a whole 200,000 taels of silver on them. Just looking at them and you want to eat their meat. A meal costs 200,000 taels of silver?" Before he could reprimand him, a rumbling sound rang out, like a magnificent army with thousands of horses and thousands of men. 7 sturdy men, like iron towers, escorted Dugu Xiaoyi, who looked like a snow lotus, into the hall. Under the contrast of her 7 brothers, Dugu Xiaoyi looked even more beautiful today. She was elegant, refined, and dazzling. Her black hair was slightly fluffy and tied up with a sparkling and translucent hairpin. On the hairpin, there were 3 small pearls slowly rippling. Her small face was snow-white and delicate. She had a pair of phoenix eyes and a jade-like nose. Her cherry lips carried a mischievous and pleasing craftiness. She faintly revealed a bit of happiness and shyness. She was wearing a snow-white shawl and a light green dress. On her slender waist, a snow-white jade pendant gently swayed. Although the young girl's figure was still a little immature and had not developed to the extent of being hot, her curves were still graceful and exquisite. The little girl stood at the door, her clothes fluttering in the breeze. Under the rising sun, she looked like someone who didn't belong to this world. Her beautiful eyes looked at Jun Moxie intentionally and unintentionally. The 1,000 kinds of amorous feelings of a young girl in the prime of her youth were like the most moving scenery in the world. Jun Mo couldn't help but be absent-minded for a moment, even though he had the ability to remain calm even if Tai collapsed in front of him. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen a beauty before?" Duguin growled in a very displeased manner. His tall and sturdy body took a step forward, directly blocking Jun Moxie's line of sight. It was as if Jun Moxie would see his little sister disappear if he looked at her. "Oh, so brother Dugu is here too. Why don't we drink a little more? We have good wine." Jun Moxie squinted his eyes. Duguing immediately glared at him. "What do you mean drink a little more? You've been cheated once. I'm warning you, brat. You better behave this time and don't look for trouble." "Humph." He snorted heavily as he said this, his expression very strange. It turned out that when Dugu Xiaoyi returned home last night, she was naturally worried about the 7 brothers that Yi Guhan said had been taken down by Jun Moxie. She hurriedly went to visit them. When she entered the door, the 7 tall and sturdy men were squatting in front of the dining table eating porridge. The pot that was too big to feed a bear was already overturned. This couldn't be blamed on them for being rice buckets. It was just that these 7 people's stomachs had almost been burnt through by Jun Moxie's wine. For the next few days, they absolutely couldn't eat anything that was not easy to digest, not even something that was slightly greasy. These 7 fellows, who normally couldn't live without meat and wine, were already complaining incessantly. They were hungry. If these burly men could only eat porridge for 3 meals a day, it was simply terrifying just thinking about it. "Ah. How did Jun Moxie torture you? How did you lose so much weight? We haven't seen each other for a few days." Quickly tell this little sister will stand up for you. The moment Dugu Xiaoyi saw this, she felt distressed. She was extremely shocked to see that all 7 of her brothers seemed to have lost a lot of weight. But her words immediately caused the 7 burly men to feel disgusted. Heroes and legends rushed forward, but at the same time, they felt uncomfortable in their hearts. What? What do you mean by June Moxie tortured us? That brat thinks he can torture us. What a joke. That day, we clearly subdued that brat. If we hadn't been greedy for a few cups, we wouldn't have ended up like this, even if that wine was really good. Bah, that brat June Moxie. Humph, that day, your 3rd brother slapped him down. With that small physique of his, he wants to torture us. Wahaha, Xiao Yi must be joking, right? You still want to stand up for us? Stand up for that brat? Dugu Hao grinned. That's right, 6th brother, even stomped on that brat. That brat cried out in pain, so I, 6th brother, kicked him fiercely. If it wasn't for Grandpa June's face, 6th brother would have crushed him to death. He. Dugu Shang shamelessly raised his head and boasted. Then why did I hear that all of you were defeated by June Moxie? The one who told me this news is a peerless expert. The 7 brothers were all idiots. None of them could see that their precious little sister was frowning. So, for my sake, he suffered so much, but he didn't say a single word. I was still angry at him just now. With June Moxie's ability, how could he defeat all 7 of us? This is a rumor, a blatant rumor. Dugu Xiong boasted shamelessly as he stood up. He rolled up his sleeves, revealing his thick and hairy arms. Exerting strength, his muscles bulged. Xiao Yi, you actually believe this kind of rumor? It must be that brat June Moxie was defeated by us brothers. His heart is unwilling, but he can't do anything to us. So, he can only use this kind of rumor to comfort himself. That's right. This rumor is too good. 3 people make a tiger. Not only did we beat June Mo Siab that day, but we also nearly tore down the June family's mansion. If it weren't for those jars. Dugu Jia had barely finished his sentence when Dugu Chong covered his mouth with his hand. The 7 brothers beamed with joy as they boasted. The more they boasted, the more they felt that this was how things should be. The more they boasted, the prouder they became. In the end, they boasted so much that even they were intoxicated by their lies. It was as if Jun Dashao had really been taught a lesson by them. He didn't do anything to me, you actually treated him like this. His body is so weak, how could he bear it? How could you do this? The more Dugu Xiaoyi heard, the angrier she got. The more she heard, the more her heart ached. Suddenly, she started sobbing. How could you bear to do this? Too much boasting. The 7 brothers looked at each other in dismay. All 7 of them had the same awkward expression on their faces. Their 14 large eyes were filled with the same expression. What is this? Our stomachs are about to be punctured. Can't you just let us talk freely? Dugu Xiaoyi cried and stamped her feet. She whimpered, You are too ruthless, boo-hoo. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I hate you, boo-hoo. She suddenly turned around and ran away while crying. What's going on? Duguing was confused as he looked at his brothers. I don't know. The remaining 6 were also confused. They shook their heads at the same time. Then, they uniformly turned their heads to the left, and then to the right. Then, Dugu Wudi saw his daughter run out crying because of his sons and nephews. His anger was immediately ignited. He aggressively kicked the door open, grabbed the 7 brothers, and gave them another beating. When they heard that Dugu Xiaoyi wanted to go to the Jun family's residence, the Dugu family didn't oppose it. What a joke! They couldn't wait to separate these 2. But now, they want to deliver themselves to their doorstep. How could this be? Therefore, Dugu Xiaoyi brought out her invincible coquettishness. She acted like a spoiled child. Then, she sobbed and sniffled. Tears dripped down her face. Thus, all 3 generations of the Dugu family surrendered. However, he also put forward a condition: he could go, but he must be accompanied by a group of relatives and friends, the 7 brothers. As a result, Dugu Xiaoyi's solo outing suddenly turned into a huge entourage, and the momentum was huge. With a whooshing sound, Little White leapt out and landed on the ground. Shaking his white fur, he turned his head and looked at Duguing with an unfriendly expression. Letting out 2 fierce whines, he then proceeded with his unfinished business. With a whooshing sound, he quickly plunged into Jun Moc's bosom and stretched out his paws, whining twice before lying down with a peace of mind. Even though the little fellow was still a Xian beast cub and had yet to fully mature, it could even be said that it had yet to start developing. However, the arrogance of a high-level Xian beast in its bones was not one bit less. That big guy actually dared to block my way to get close to a good person. This is intolerable. If I hadn't grown up, I would have bitten off your penis. I'll let you know how powerful this big guy is. Jun Mo affectionately held Little White in his arms, and extended his hand to greet the guests. Then, he hastily called for the servants to serve him tea. This was the first time that he had willingly held the little guy. The little guy seemed very excited, and kept crawling around in his arms. He sniffed here and there, and was very busy. Jun Moxie looked at Dugu Xiaoyi with a smile. Miss Dugu is so beautiful today. I can't take my eyes off you. Dugu Xiaoyi's face lit up. She pouted coquettishly. You know what beauty is. Humph, I thought you didn't see it. But in her heart, she was grumbling. Why did he call me Miss Dugu? He's treating me like an outsider. Why didn't he call me little girl? How pleasing to the ear. Jun Moxie hastily laughed. No, no, no. He started to circulate his energy. At the same time, he immersed his spiritual sense into his sea of consciousness. Then, his spiritual sense shot into the Hongjun pagoda like an arrow. With Little White in his hands, he naturally wanted to test it out. This was the first time that Jun Moxie had used his spiritual sense to activate the Hongjun pagoda when it hadn't risen on its own. Boom! Chapter 142. Today's 3rd update has arrived. Exhausted, I'm begging for monthly votes and recommendation votes. The moment Jun Moc's spiritual sense came into contact with the Hongjun pagoda, and the Hongjun pagoda flew into the air, the little creature's drooping ears suddenly straightened up with a flutter sound. A small head suddenly lifted up, and its adorable big eyes actually looked a little serious at this moment, but there was also an indescribable sense of surprise. 9 people sat in a circle in Jun Moxie's courtyard. Dugu Xiaoyi forcibly sat next to Jun Moxie in the name of taking care of Little White. As an elder, Jun Wui sat peacefully in his wheelchair and did not participate in the gathering of the younger generation, only intentionally looking over. The 7 brothers of the Dugu family had bragged and fooled themselves in front of their younger sister. After all, the former had suffered a big loss at the hands of Jun Moxie. If these 7 people were to attack Jun Moxie recklessly, it would not be easy to deal with them. However, Jun Wuyi's 3rd master Jun was sitting next to him. And, the 7 brothers were very well behaved. In fact, they looked like 7 well-behaved children. They were the direct descendants of Dugu Zongheng and Dugu Wudi, the 2 troublemakers. The former had suffered a big loss at the hands of Jun Dashao, so why were they so quiet today? This was the so-called, a man's reputation is like a tree's shadow. The Dugu brothers had heard about the legends of the Jun family's 3 heroes from their grandfather, father, and uncle when they were young, and had even heard about them after they joined the army themselves. So, they could recite them like the back of their hands. White General Jun Wu Hui, Iron-blooded God of War Jun Wu Meng, Blood General Jun Wui. The fame of these 3 men and their legendary deeds had spread far and wide in the army. In fact, they had become legends among the soldiers of Tian Xiang. In fact, old man Dugu had said, how can that old man Jun Zhan Tian have such an outstanding son? Only I can have such a good son. Their father, uncle, and Dugu Wudi had always hated it when others said that someone was stronger than them. Only when these three brothers were mentioned would they become speechless. Don't judge Jun Wui by his quiet and lonely demeanor. But they knew that if Jun Wui were to go crazy, his craziness would be no less than that of his two brothers. When Jun Wu Hui and Jun Wu Meng died mysteriously, Jun Wu Yi stood up with his sword and brazenly dispatched his troops. He changed his previous style of planning before taking action. In 10 days, he commanded his army to traverse 1,500 miles. 10 battles, 10 victories, and 10 victories. He was invincible. He destroyed 9 cities of the Yutang Empire as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He slaughtered the Yutang Empire's army of 200,000 like he was chopping melons and vegetables. He took the lead in every battle, and the name of the Blood Cloak General spread throughout the world from that battle. It was not until the army had advanced 300 miles into the Yutang Empire that they were stopped by their old enemy, Zhao Jianhun, and the two sides began to fight in a bloody battle. Zhao Jianhun was defeated 3 times in a row, but although he was not discouraged, it was clear that he was no match for the enemy. However, at the last moment, Jun Wui was suddenly attacked by a mysterious master, and once again followed in the footsteps of his 2 older brothers, a great general of a generation, crippled to this day. However, that battle had been recognized by the entire world as the one that had brought glory to the Tian Xiang Empire. Advancing like a hurricane, the Iron Army of hundreds of thousands directly advanced into the enemy's country. A lone army penetrating deep into enemy territory, 10 battles and 10 victories. This unprecedented feat had long since become a legend. Although Jun Wui had to leave the army due to a medical condition, but the name of the Blood Cloak General was still regarded as an idol of the military, and the legend had become more and more popular. Everyone who talked about that battle couldn't help but be enraptured, and their blood was boiling. When the 7 brothers of the Dugu family had accompanied Dugu Xiaoyi, they had been warned by Dugu Wudi, you must never, ever provoke Jun Wui. You must never, ever, ever provoke Jun Wui. In the entire Tian Xiang Empire, only the Dugu family would dare to openly oppose the Jun family. And the Dugu family's Dugu Wu Di had the courage to beat up Jun Mo Xia, so much so that he even had the courage to kill Jun Mo Xia. So, the Jun family also had the courage to do the same to the Dugu family. And that person was Jun Wui. If Jun Wui were to go berserk, and cut the 7 descendants of the Dugu family into pieces, then even Dugu Wudi would not think that it would be an accident. This kind of thing, according to Jun Wui's character in the past, was completely possible, and would also have the courage to do it. Jun Wu Yi was an idol in the hearts of the 7 brothers, and they were the heroes and legends of the past. They might have been able to show off their strength in front of Jun Moxie, but in front of Jun Wui, they were more obedient than a child. But then again, Third Master Jun really wasn't looking at them right now. In recent years, he had cultivated his mind, and his bearing was no longer the same as it was in the past. Killing the 7 Dugu brothers in one go was something that Jun Wui couldn't do. But while Third Master Jun couldn't do it, it didn't mean that no one would dare to do it. The person that Third Master Jun was looking at was his precious nephew, Jun Moxie. Third Master Jun felt that the more he understood this nephew, the more mysterious he felt. Jun Dashao's ruthless methods of killing people with a flick of his fingers had become a norm. In all honesty, with the strength that Jun Moxie had displayed, the 7 Dugu brothers would die in a moment if both sides were to fight, and no one would have a chance to survive. With Third Master Jun's understanding of his nephew, if the Dugu brothers didn't open their eyes, then Jun Dashao would really dare to make a move, and that would be a serious matter. Therefore, Third Master Jun could only sit there, and observe the situation from afar, and prevent any accidents from happening. But it was obvious that the thing that Third Master Jun was afraid of would not happen. Because, Jun Dashao's current state was quite unusual. Not to mention his third uncle, the Duga siblings, and the others, he couldn't even feel his own existence. There was no other reason than that he was in a very dangerous and unusual situation. In order to verify his own judgment, he had forcibly stimulated the Hongjun Pagoda with his own consciousness. Within the world of his consciousness, the Hongjun Pagoda was stimulated, and rose into the air, and rotated at high speed. An endless stream of spiritual qi gushed out from the Hongjun Pagoda, and did not stop for a long time. Instead, the spiritual qi became more and more concentrated, and in the end, it turned into a blazing white light. Jun Moxie had never imagined that such a situation would occur. He only felt that all the tendons and meridians in his body were full to the point of bursting, swelling to the point of bursting. It was as if his body was in danger of exploding from the surging spiritual qi at any time. He was so shocked that he no longer cared about where he was, and concentrated on using the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, absorbing the spiritual qi that had just gushed into his tendons and meridians. For a moment, Jun Moxie could even hear the sound of the spiritual qi passing through his tendons and meridians. What made him most shocked was that the moment his consciousness pierced into the Hongjun Pagoda, it suddenly became one with the Hongjun Pagoda. It became inseparable, and he couldn't withdraw it even if he wanted to. Junior Leopard let out a cry of ecstasy. Junior Leopard cried out in ecstasy. His 4 little paws firmly hugged Jun Moxie. Even his little mouth and belly were pressed against Jun Moxie's body. Junior Leopard closed his eyes and absorbed the heaven and earth aura from Jun Moxie's body with a satisfied look on his face. "You're really a good man, giving me so much pure spiritual qi. Good man, I'll never leave you again." These were Junior Leopard's thoughts. All of this happened within Jun Moxie's body. Apart from Jun Dashao and Junior Leopard, who didn't understand human language, there wasn't much unusual. To outsiders, Jun Moxie was still sitting quietly with an enigmatic smile, and no one would notice anything unusual. However, not much unusual didn't mean that there was absolutely nothing unusual. At the moment when the Hongjun Pagoda flew up, Duga Xiaoi, who was the closest to Jun Moxie and was paying attention to Dashao's every move, was the first to notice something unusual. Almost at the same time, the Gudu's 7 brothers also noticed something unusual. At this moment, Duga Xiaoi and her 7 brothers had the same feeling. Although Jun Moxie was sitting in front of them, it was as if they were thousands of miles apart. He was obviously sitting in front of them, but they felt that the person in front of them was just an illusion, illusory and unreal, like a mass of air. Although they knew that it existed objectively, they couldn't touch it. In an instant, the 8 of them felt as if they were dreaming. This kind of strange feeling was extremely mysterious. It was like the bright moon in the sky at night, seemingly within reach, but also unattainable and untouchable. At the same time, Jun Wui, who was sitting far away, suddenly raised his eyebrows, and 2 sharp rays of light shot out from his tiger-like eyes. He looked at Jun Moxie in disbelief. As a Tian Xian expert, he could clearly feel an inconceivably strong power slowly emanating from Jun Moxie's body, and gradually overflowing into the heaven and earth. The scorching sun and autumn wind in the sky seemed to have come to a complete standstill at this moment. The spiritual qi that was scattered in all directions seemed to have turned into a spiritual qi storm as it violently surged towards the Jun residence. Then, it formed a spiritual qi whirlpool above the Jun residence that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Then, it rumbled as it pressed down. There wasn't a trace of wind in the sky, but in the courtyard of Jun Moxie, all the flowers and trees in the surroundings suddenly fell in the opposite direction with a rustling sound. And the Naiwan Palace on top of Jun Moxie's head was the center of this storm. Although the spiritual qi in the sky couldn't be seen by anyone, but it was majestic and orderly, and was slowly pressing down in an enormous manner. In the midst of the silence, there seemed to be a xiao xiao sound echoing from the depths of everyone's soul, as if something was rotating at a high speed, at a speed that no one had ever seen or even heard of before. Jun Wui knew that something was wrong, and this matter couldn't be seen by outsiders. So, he made a prompt decision, and pressed his hands on his wheelchair. His whole body flew up with a schwa sound, and flew over the 8 Dugu siblings like a big bird. Bang! 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 He struck out 8 times at lightning speed, and knocked the 8 siblings unconscious in an instant. How could the 8 Dugu siblings be a match for an expert like Tian Xian? So, they naturally fell unconscious in response, and didn't even have the slightest reaction. Chapter 143. That violent spiritual qi had already silently formed a huge tornado. Although it couldn't be seen, it could definitely be felt. Its power was so great that it could kill many people. Apart from Jun Mo Xie, who was the instigator of this, the others were bound to be turned into ashes the moment it landed. Even Jun Wui, a Tian Xian expert, might not be able to escape. Du Guing and the others were not aware of this impending danger because their Xian qi was weak. However, Jun Wui was a genuine Tian Xian expert. How could he not be aware of it? Therefore, he made a prompt decision to knock them unconscious and take them away. He did not even hesitate to use his full strength to stake it all on this one throw. Because he was afraid that if he was a step too late, he would only be able to save a few of them. Then, the rest of them would not be able to escape. Therefore, Jun Wui could only take them away in one go. Even if he had to expose his own strength, he would not hesitate. However, Jun Wuyi was also certain that the Dugu siblings' strength would not be able to move even if they were aware that he was the one who took action. Following Jun Wuyi's departure, a deep footprint was left on the hard stone ground by his footsteps. The blue light still shone brightly. Almost at the same time that Jun Wuyi's figure had just left the small courtyard, the spiritual qi in the sky suddenly began to crazily press down. The tip of the spiritual qi formed a high-speed rotating cone, and fell directly on Jun Moxi's Baihui acupoint. At the same time, the Hongjun pagoda in his spiritual space emitted a buzzing sound. The pagoda's body instantly enlarged by several times, and countless rays of golden light shot out from it. A wisp of pure spiritual qi formed a blazing white light, and pierced upwards with an unstoppable momentum. Its target was also Jun Moxi's Baihui acupoint. Jun Mo Xie's motionless body suddenly trembled violently, and his face twitched. His Baihui acupoint had suddenly opened up under the attack from both the inside and the outside. A smooth road had opened up between the outside world and the Hongjun pagoda. The overwhelming amount of spiritual qi seemed to have unscrupulously opened up a passageway through Jun Mo Xie's Baihui acupoint. After the Hongjun pagoda's attack, the spiritual qi quickly converged, and like a whale sucking in water, it completely absorbed the surging spiritual qi. The huge amount of spiritual qi that had gathered in the outside world completely disappeared in a few breaths. However, Jun Moxi's body had yet to calm down. The Hongjun pagoda's output of spiritual qi did not slow down at all. After swallowed, the spiritual qi from heaven and earth continuously poured into his qi again, then rotated, disappeared, and was absorbed again. Little Leopard was in Jun Moxi's arms. For him, the little spiritual qi that leaked out from Jun Moxi was enough. What's more, this was the purest spiritual qi in the world, especially after it had been filtered by the Hongjun pagoda. So at this moment, the little thing's benefits were incomparable. At this moment, it seemed as if the snow-white fur on its body was about to shine. It cried out in pain, but it seemed to realize that this was a great opportunity. It forced itself to endure the pain. The bones in its body cracked, and then the white fur on its body fell off, leaving only a small red ball of flesh. Even its eyelashes and beard fell off. After a while, Little White whimpered again. Its tiny meatball-like body continuously trembled in pain, and at a speed visible to the naked eye, a layer of snow-white fur rapidly grew on its body. The fur was long and elegant, and it was even longer than its original fur. The joints in his body crackled like beans being fried. Little White slowly relaxed its body, opened its eyes, and propped up its 4 little paws from June Moxie's body. It looked at its own body with indescribable joy, and then excitedly ran around June Moxie's body. It stopped after running around 5 or 6 times, and then lowered its head. Its little tongue lovingly licked its newly grown fur, and its expression was one of contentment. As June Moxie's body underwent a huge change, and the spiritual qi in the world began to move in an abnormal manner, the entire Tianxiang city's super experts looked out of the window in shock. Such a huge change in the world, how could they not be shocked? All the experts broke the windows and doors at the same time, and watched in amazement as the huge spiritual qi vortex suddenly disappeared without a trace. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and thought, what kind of cultivation does it take to create such an earth-shattering movement? Invisibly, the spiritual qi vortex covered a radius of dozens of miles, and in the hearts of these experts, it had already become a special forbidden area. Even if it was the great master Shenxian, they would not have the courage to explore such a terrifying existence. Even though everyone's heart was extremely curious, but no one had the courage to take the first step. This was a pressure that could disdain the world. In the face of such pressure, even if it was the peak of the great master Shenxian, it was afraid that he would be nothing more than an ant. In the magnificent jewel hall, an old man with white hair and beard came out of the window, and quietly stood on the roof of the magnificent jewel hall. After a while, 2 people dressed in white landed beside him. It was Mu Shuetong and Xiao Han. This level of skill, I'm afraid that he has already surpassed the level of the great master Shenxian. The 9th elder's face was full of shock and sadness. I didn't think that there would be such a strong existence in the Tianxiang city. Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong were shocked and asked, 9th elder, is this person actually so strong? Is there a higher realm above the great master Shenxian? Strong? The 9th elder gently shook his head. His face was dignified, and his eyes were dignified. The word, strong, is not enough to describe this person. As for a higher realm, with your current strength, it's best that you don't know. The 9th elder's eyes were full of fear. It flashed and then disappeared. Mu Shuetong and Xiao Han's complexion changed at the same time. Outside the city, 3 groups of people were hurrying towards the Tianxiang city, and almost at the same time, the team issued an order to come to a screeching halt. From the Silver Blizzard City's team, the little princess, who was wearing a veil, jumped down and asked, 3rd elder, why did you stop? Aren't we going to reach our destination if we go a bit further? The 3rd elder and the 6th elder both felt the earth-shattering aura in the distance, and looked at each other, only to see the shock in each other's eyes. The 6th elder sucked in a breath of cold air, stroked his beard, and said in a heavy tone, the previous movement was obviously not a fight between more than one person, but if it was caused by only one person, then this movement is too frightening. What kind of person has such frightening strength, and what kind of trouble has the 9th elder caused this time? 3rd elder, if this person is also causing this movement for the sake of the Xian Dan. He paused, shook his head, and smiled bitterly. Then, we might be sending sheep into the tiger's mouth. The 3rd elder's frosty eyebrows wrinkled tightly. If such an existence is only a tiger, then do you think that we have the qualifications to be sheep? Perhaps only a dragon, a divine dragon whose head can be seen but not its tail can be compared to it. The 6th elder remained silent for a long time, and then said, 3rd elder, I've traveled the world my entire life, and today is the first time I've seen such a terrifying existence. I'm afraid that even a great master wouldn't be able to compare. The 3rd elder sighed, and said, I've also never seen such a person, and I feel that this person is even stronger than a great master. However, this is not necessarily a bad thing. This person's strength has already far surpassed our generation, and I believe that even a level 9 Xian core might not be able to enter his eyes. I think that perhaps this person has been living in seclusion in the Tianxiang city for a long time, and has been constantly coming to the Tianxiang city to stir up trouble, which might have annoyed this person. Perhaps this person doesn't want to act rashly, and has released his imposing aura in order to deter the heroes. If there is such a person in the Tianxiang city, then we must be very careful after entering the city. We mustn't make the slightest mistake, and we mustn't act rashly. Otherwise, I'm afraid that we won't be able to return to the Silver Blizzard City for the rest of our lives. Yes. Third Elder's words make sense, and will do as Third Elder says. The Sixth Elder frowned. Generally, such a person wouldn't exist in a powerful family, and should be hiding in the streets, so, that's right, it's exactly like that. As I just said, regarding the Xian core, even if it's a level 9 Xian core, for such an existence, it doesn't have any meaning. His appearance shouldn't be because of the Xian Dan. The Third Elder's eyes shone with extreme excitement. If we have the fate to meet such a strong person, then we'll certainly be able to obtain great benefits. Even if we have to give up one or more Xian Dan, it's absolutely worth it as long as we have the opportunity to meet such a person. The Sixth Elder shuddered at first, but then nodded with an excited look on his face, and said, "That's right, there is nothing else in this secular world that can interest us. Glory, splendor, wealth, high positions, marquises, what are they to us? Even if it's a level 9 Xian core, it can't give us what we truly want. I just don't know what this senior's temper is like, such a strong person, I'm afraid." The two old men's eyes were fervently staring at the distant Tianxiang city walls, and the look in their eyes was getting more and more passionate. The imperial advisor of the Yutang Empire, Fei Mengchen, suddenly stopped in her tracks, and looked at the Tianxiang city, her expression gradually becoming gloomy. "I didn't think that there would be such a strong person in the Tianxiang Empire. Is the great master Shen Xian at the peak? Or perhaps he's an even higher existence. It seems that there are many things in this world that are beyond my understanding." Zhao Jianhun was riding on his horse, and his sharp eyes were looking straight ahead as Lengleng asked, "Is the imperial advisor rejoicing?" Although Zhao Jianhun was also a famous general, but his Xian Qi cultivation was not very high, and although he was aware of the slight changes in the world, but he didn't understand what these changes meant, or it could be said that his level was simply stuck at a lower level. Fei Mengchen's face was extremely gloomy, and her eyes were slightly closed. She was still shocked by the terrifying strength of this peerless master, and was then questioned by Zhao Jianhun. "Zhao Jianhun, are you still suspecting me about Jun Wuhui? Shouldn't I be suspicious? For consecutive inexplicable and humiliating victories. However, it was during those delicate times that you, as the imperial preceptor, were not in the imperial capital. May I ask, where did you go during that time?" Zhao Jianhun's face was expressionless. "If I was facing the enemy head-on, then as long as I had the opportunity to kill Jun Wuhui, I would not hesitate to do so. But 4 times in a row, they were defeated by the enemy first, and then at the last moment, the enemy's commander died or was crippled. Then, they won the battle inexplicably." Zhao Jianhun suppressed his anger, and growled in a low voice, "The entire continent is saying that Zhao Jianhun is a lucky general." Lucky general. Do you understand the meaning of these words, imperial advisor? Dog shit luck. Dog shit luck. Chapter 144. Is personal honor more important than the people of the country? Fei Mengchen's white eyebrows twitched. Personal honor. This is a soldier's honor. Zhao Jianhun laughed bitterly. "That's right, why am I telling you this? You don't understand at all. You're an important figure in the imperial court. You don't need to know what a soldier's honor is, you only care about the results, right?" Fei Mengchen laughed in exasperation and pointed at Tianxiang City. "Didn't you notice it just now? Even if your level of strength is relatively low, you should still be aware that if such a strong person were to participate in the war, then the Tianxiang Empire will be able to unify the entire continent in a very short time. This is undoubtedly a calamity for us." What is a soldier's honor? I naturally know this, but a soldier's honor is not the same as being pedantic. Not to mention that I did not kill Jun Wuhui. Even if I did, for the sake of Yutang, I have a clear conscience. Zhao Jianhun's back straightened like a javelin, and Lenglang said, "A clear conscience. When has a despicable person who only knows how to stab people in the back ever had a clear conscience? Right and wrong will be judged by the public." Fei Mengchen was flabbergasted by his words. What kind of person is this? I've never seen such a stubborn person. Every time this issue is brought up, this old man has already explained it for 10 years and you still don't believe me. In the direction of the Tianfa forest, a group of savage-like soldiers were marching out of the Tianfa forest, one step at a time. Everyone in this team was dressed in rags. At best, they only had rags hanging on their bodies. Some of them only had a piece of animal skin wrapped around their crotch. Everyone's body was covered in crisscrossing scars. There were no less than dozens of scars, and the original color of their skin could not be seen clearly. From these scars, it could be seen that each of them had wandered on the edge of life and death many times. There were also a few people whose legs were obviously injured. They limped when they walked, but every step they took was firm. They refused to be supported by their companions and dragged their bodies, but they did not fall behind. They did not even need crutches. Although their bodies were tired, their spirits were high. Their eyes were filled with sharpness and wildness, and their muscles were bulging. Hundreds of people walked together. Even though they were in such a sorry state, they naturally exuded a sharp killing intent. No one dared to look him in the eye. Everyone was carrying a large bundle on their back. Even those who were heavily injured were no exception. Every time their hands touched these bundles, a trace of pride would flash across their faces. Obviously, the things on their backs were the spoils of war that they had obtained with their own hands. Step by step, they walked towards the direction of the Tianxiang city. Although their pace was slow, it was steady. Although there was an incomparable urgency in their eyes, their footsteps were still steady. These people were the 300 Jun family guards that Jun Moxie had exiled to the Tianfa forest to undergo death training. After a few short months, if they were or in the past, then they had now been refined into steel. If they were steel in the past, then now, they had transformed into sharp killing weapons that showed off their abilities. Behind them, in the depths of the Tianfa forest, two black silhouettes streaked across the sky with a sharp whistling sound, and flew towards the Tianxiang city at an extremely fast speed. No one could clearly see whether these two silhouettes were people or something else. They could only see two black silhouettes, and then disappeared in a flash. Jun Moxie only felt that the moment the spiritual chi penetrated his body, his meridians suddenly began to swell, filling up his meridians in an instant. The chi flowing through his meridians suddenly burst, but then disappeared like a bottomless hole, sucked away by the Hengjun Pagoda. After a moment of silence, the chi returned like a raging tide, and the Hengjun Pagoda temporarily stopped its output of spiritual chi. The chi flowing through his meridians had actually grown a lot stronger in this short period of time, and had also condensed a lot. His meridians already felt full. Right now, Jun Moxie had already reached the bottleneck of the first stage of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. All he needed was an opportunity, and he would be able to enter the second stage in one go. For a cultivation technique like the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, this kind of progress was simply a miracle that even the gods and Buddhas could not believe. Right now, Jun Moxie's true strength, if measured by the Xian Qi standards of the Xian continent, had already broken through the 9th level barrier, and had broken through to the middle level of the silver level. But in terms of the effectiveness and applicability of his cultivation technique, even the great master Shen Xian would not be able to match up to him. This was equivalent to taking a huge leap forward in an instant, and it was a huge step. In such a short period of time, all the spiritual qi that had been absorbed by the Hengjun Pagoda had already entered the Hengjun Pagoda. Such a huge amount of spiritual qi had actually been swallowed by the Hengjun Pagoda in one gulp. Furthermore, it was like a drop of water had been added into the boundless sea, completely not causing any waves. Although that drop of water was big enough, it was still too small compared to the boundless sea. This was the first time that the Hung-Jun Pagoda had been actively activated by Jun Moxie, and it had actually erupted with such a terrifying power. Just this power alone was enough to make the entire world tremble. Actually, this did not mean that Jun Moxie already possessed some kind of invincible power. It was just that the Hung-Jun Pagoda was a divine object from the ancient times, before the creation of the heavens and earth. Its effects and starting point were naturally ridiculously high. Although Jun Dashao's strength had increased, and it had increased by quite a lot, it was only relative to his original strength. The spiritual qi that had gathered in the air was still being absorbed by the Hung-Jun Pagoda, and the surface of Jun Moxie's small courtyard did not seem to have changed at all. The reason why it was said to be, almost, was because anyone who was more attentive would be able to feel it the moment they stepped into the courtyard. The entire ground had actually sunk by 3 inches, a whole 3 inches. Furthermore, the jade table that had once been in front of Jun Moxie had already disappeared without a trace. It was as if ice had melted into water without a sound. A pained expression appeared on Jun Moxie's face. He had tried to withdraw his spiritual sense from the Hung-Jun Pagoda many times, but he actually knew that it was still locked onto the Hung-Jun Pagoda. Jun Moxie did not understand, so he could only wait patiently and deal with the myriad of changes by remaining unchanged. Suddenly, the interior of the Hung-Jun Pagoda rumbled, and Jun Moxie only felt a sharp pain in his head. Suddenly, the Hung-Jun Pagoda slowly fell back to its original position, and the surrounding light disappeared in an instant. At the same time, Jun Moxie suddenly felt that there was suddenly an additional shadow in his mind. The heavens are divided into Qian Kun, and the earth is divided into Yin and Yang. Yin and Yang go through reincarnation, and all living things are born. At the beginning of the human body, it is nothing more than Yin and Yang. Creation is born and creation is gone. Therefore, it can be hidden in Yin and Yang. All living things can be hidden, and so can the human body. Yin-Yang escape. Jun Moxie slowly chewed on this yin-yang escape technique word by word, and slowly comprehended it. He discovered that this so-called yin-yang escape could be said to be a very practical technique. After mastering it, one's body could be hidden in any object in the surroundings at any time, and at any place. If one mastered it to the peak, one could even make one's body invisible in the air. One could travel hundreds of miles in the water, and traverse over mountains and ridges in the earth. What kind of awesome technique was this? The Hung-Jun Pagoda is indeed not an ordinary object. If only there were more of these things. Jun Moxie sighed in satisfaction. Suddenly, a thought arose in his mind. If I were to become invisible and peep on a beautiful woman bathing, for example, peep on my beautiful sister-in-law, as soon as this thought arose, Jun Moxie suddenly spat out a mouthful of saliva, and scolded, "Jun Moxie, if you die, then so be it. Why do you have to leave behind so many dirty and vulgar thoughts to affect me? This is really intolerable." If the deceased Jun Moxie had known about this after his death, he would certainly have wept bitter tears of grievance. Big brother, this is your own thoughts, okay? It is absolutely your own thoughts, what does it have to do with me? My soul has already flown away, and you still push the blame onto me. Even if you become a human or a ghost, you can't be so shameless. Jun Moxie had never come into contact with cultivation before. In fact, he did not even know what cultivation was. Naturally, he did not know how powerful this yin-yang escape technique was. Since the beginning of time, there had always been only 5 escape techniques: metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Moreover, because the heavens and earth were not complete, the 5 elements were not complete. Furthermore, one had to specialize in one according to one's aptitude and talent. Only then would one have a chance to practice it. And this yin-yang escape technique was based on the number of yin and yang. It was above the heavens and earth. Therefore, it had surpassed the scope of the incomplete heavens and earth. Under the cultivation of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, one would be able to freely conceal oneself at any time and any place once mastered. It was not restricted by the rules of the 5 elements escape techniques. Such a technique, if placed in an ordinary cultivation world, would be enough to cause many people to fight over it. But Jun Moxie did not realize that this technique was so great and rare. He had obtained it from the Hongjun Pagoda, but he felt that it was only right and proper. Instead, he felt that it was too little. If this kind of thinking was made known to the cultivators of other worlds, they would immediately spit out a mouthful of blood and die in grief and indignation. Humans should not be so shameless. Jun Wui appeared in the small courtyard with a face full of shock. He carefully walked over, and his footsteps were uncertain as he stepped on the ground. With his sharp senses after advancing to the level of a Tian Xian expert, he could naturally feel that the ground under his feet had sunk by 3 inches. It did not disappear, but the ground under his feet had become even firmer. How was this possible? How could the ground sink by 3 inches in an instant? What kind of terrifying strength was required? This was not surprising. What was even more strange was that not a single leaf had fallen from the flowers and plants in the garden. Such a violent impact, such a huge movement, and yet not a single leaf had fallen. This was too strange. What was even more surprising was that the jade table that the 8 of them had been sitting on earlier, which was made of a special material and was abnormally sturdy, had also evaporated without a sound. The ground had sunk, the jade table had disappeared, but not a single leaf had fallen. What was going on? How could such an outrageous phenomenon be explained? Chapter 145. Jun Moxie's thoughts returned to his consciousness like a receding tide. He seemed to be in a trance. I'm also very curious. Third uncle, please don't ask me what's going on. I'm also very confused. I don't know what's going on. Jun Wui smiled tolerantly. It can't be a bad thing. Jun Moxie looked at him apologetically and said, it shouldn't be a bad thing. He paused and asked, what about them? I knocked them unconscious. They're still unconscious. Jun Wui sighed, this is very sudden. It's better that they don't know about it. It's indeed very sudden. Third uncle, you've handled it very well. Jun Moxie stood up. The Hongjun Pagoda was related to the greatest secret of his transmigration to this world. At the same time, it was also the greatest reliance he could rely on to protect his life in this strange world. Therefore, he absolutely could not reveal even a little bit of it. Even if it was to his closest kin, he absolutely could not reveal it. Some secrets were destined to be kept to himself for the rest of his life. Only Little White was exceptionally excited. He ran back and forth on Jun Moxie's body as if he was running on flat ground. He was so excited that he didn't know what to do. Occasionally, he would roll a few times in the air. However, he was always very stable. He would never fall to the ground. He would even jump up and grab a strand of Jun Moxie's hair. He would hang on Jun Moxie's body for a while. Jun Moxie helplessly looked at this obviously excited little thing. He frowned and said, this little guy seems to be relying on me. Third uncle, it's all right now. Wake them up later. You should first think about how to explain this so that they won't get suspicious. Jun Wui smiled, but his eyes suddenly fell on Little White's body, and he suddenly stopped talking. His eyes flashed with a look of shock as he blurted out, how is this possible? It actually advanced. How is this possible? It was originally a rank 7 cub, now. Damn. With his eyesight as an expert, Tian Xian could naturally tell that the little fellow was different from before. Finally, he couldn't help but curse. With Jun Wui's personality, it was natural that he was shocked to the extreme when he blurted out these 2 words. To put it bluntly, even if a living ghost appeared in front of Jun Wui, he might not have lost his composure like this. A high-level Xian beast that was still a cub could actually advance. This was no longer a miracle, but a miracle. You've advanced? Really? Jun Mo Xia grabbed the little thing, and turned it over and over to inspect it despite its protests. Then, he said in a puzzled manner, "There's nothing different. This little thing's penis is still so small." Jun Wui was speechless. "My good nephew, I really thought that you knew everything. Isn't your argument too funny? Can a Xian beast's advancement be seen just by looking at its penis?" The little thing was also angry. It whimpered angrily. "No matter how you look at it, it is an existence that is close to a top-level Xian beast. No matter how attached it is to you and how it needs to please you, you can't judge it from head to toe. I despise you. Do you look at the level of a Xian beast? One must know that Xian beasts have their own limits. Their advancement is limited by their innate talent. High-level Xian beasts are especially unable to surpass this iron rule. As for a Xian beast at the peak of 7th level like the iron-winged panther, it can be said that the peak of 7th level is the highest limit of the iron-winged panther. If it wants to advance further, even if it is not absolutely impossible, it is still extremely difficult. In the case of the iron-winged panther, if it wants to make another breakthrough, it must first reach its peak strength when it is still in its prime. This is because once a Xian beast enters its later years, even if its strength reaches the peak of 7th level, it will lose the possibility of advancing due to the deterioration of its body. However, even if the iron-winged panther reaches its peak strength in its prime, it is only a prerequisite for it to have the opportunity to advance. This is because if it really wants to advance, it must obtain the blessing of the heavens and obtain some mysterious opportunities and miraculous treasures. Only then will it have the opportunity to advance. An underage iron-winged panther will not have the opportunity to advance. In fact, most iron-winged panther have to enter their later years before they can reach the peak of 7th level Xian beasts. To be able to reach the peak of 7th level Xian beasts in their prime, it is extremely rare. But at this moment, this fact, this iron rule, has been broken in front of Jun Wui. An iron-winged panther cub that is only 1 month old, who has not even come into contact with the iron-winged panther's innate talent, has actually advanced just like that. Is it because of Jun Moxie? It has only been lying on Jun Moxie's body for a while and it has advanced. During this period of time, no one else has come into contact with this little thing. What kind of concept is this? A miracle? A miracle? This is too big of a change, isn't it? Jun Wui pointed at the little guy. You actually helped it advance, how can such an earth-shattering thing be covered up? Oh my god, I actually saw a 8th level iron-winged panther, cub. Jun Wui was a little driven mad. In fact, although an 8th level iron-winged panther is extremely rare, it does not mean that it does not exist. Even if the chances are slim, there are still some 7th level peak iron-winged panther that manage to advance. But this 8th level iron-winged panther is just a cub. In the history of Xian continent's Xian beasts, this cub may not be the last, but it is definitely unprecedented. So what if he's going to advance? This has nothing to do with me, what do I know? I don't know anything. Jun Moxie had an innocent look on his face as he spread out his hands. It advanced on its own, what has it got to do with me? Who saw that it was my doing? I can only act shamelessly. Jun Wui heaved a heavy sigh and glared fiercely at his nephew. If you continue to be so careless, sooner or later you will be exposed. AI, this is an 8th level iron-winged panther ah. In truth, even with Third Master Jun's character, at this moment, he had the thought of concealing this little thing. After all, this little thing was too precious, and its future was even more limitless. This time it was not an accident. Jun Moxie powerlessly defended himself, feeling somewhat guilty. Jun Dashao was relatively simple-minded. He had already grasped certain characteristics of Xian beasts, and this matter of advancing did not seem to be very difficult. Therefore, he really did not care too much about this little thing, especially since this little thing was related to the little girl. If he could send this god of plagues away as soon as possible, then there would be no need to haggle over this matter. What happened just now? Dugu Ying's eyes turned back and forth. The other 6 people also had the same expression on their faces. Third uncle, why did you hit me? Dugu Ying did not dare to act rashly in front of Jun Wui, and respectfully addressed him as third uncle. This was mainly due to the fact that he had received family discipline since childhood. For the Dugu brothers, there were only 3 men who could hit them, and they did not dare to fight back. The first one was naturally their grandfather, Dugu Zongheng, followed by their father, Uncle Dugu Wu Di. No, the second one was Uncle Jun, and the last one was their father, Uncle Dugu Wu Di. Hit you? How could that be? You must have drunk too much a few days ago, and I happen to have a jar of wine here. You got drunk as soon as you smelled it, and fainted. I guess this is the after effect. How useless. Jun Moxie stared at them, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He looked at them with extreme disdain. It must have been hard on you. 7 bull-like strong men fainted as soon as they smelled the wine, and fainted at the same time. How rare. The 7 brothers raised their hands at the same time, and scratched their heads in embarrassment. So that's how it is. Jun Wui's movements were too fast, and he had controlled his strength very well. They had only vaguely seen Jun Wui fly up and knock them out, but they had not seen it clearly. Now that they thought about it, their minds were even more chaotic. When they smelled the strong aroma of the wine, they couldn't help but feel a little intoxicated. 7 pairs of eyes looked at the wine jars at the same time. Gulp, gulp, gulp. The sound of saliva being swallowed rang out, and they immediately forgot about the previous matter. In fact, they did not even notice that the wine jars were not here when they came. As for the table being changed, to these thick-minded brothers, they had no impression of it at all. Only Dugu Xiaoyi would not be fooled. She stared at them with her big round eyes, and was about to question them. Suddenly, Little White jumped out of Jun Moxie's arms, and climbed all over Dugu Xiaoyi's body, and excitedly made gestures in her hands, meaning, Master, look, I have advanced. Waha, why are you not happy? Didn't you see that uncle's eyes almost popped out of his eye sockets? Little White is so cute. Dugu Xiaoyi lovingly stroked the little fellow, and her pretty eyes turned into crescent moons. Seeing Little White so happy and lively today, Dugu Xiaoyi was also very happy. Just for this, she did not come in vain today. Little White's show was undoubtedly in vain. Although the little girl was exceptionally intelligent, she was limited by her experience, and did not know what advanced was. In fact, whether Little White was an iron-winged panther, a kitten, or a puppy, it did not make any difference to her. They were all pets to her. The 7 of you, come with me. Jun Wui pushed his wheelchair. Let me see what Dugu Wudi has taught you. Dugu Ying and the others looked at each other, and could not help but look excited. From Jun Wui's words, it was clear that he was going to give them pointers. Their fathers and uncles held this third uncle in high esteem. What kind of person was Jun Wui? He was the standard expert of his generation, the invincible blood general, and a legend in the army. Just a casual word of advice from him could benefit him a lot. Dugu Ying and his brothers followed behind Jun Wui, and Dugu Xiong diligently pushed Jun Wui's wheelchair. Dugu Xiong was very careful and gentle, as if he was afraid that it would jolt the third master Jun. The 7 of them didn't think that it would be inappropriate to leave their little sister alone here. They had even forgotten why they had come here today. Third uncle's charm was really great. These 7 tall and strong men actually followed him. Jun Moxie sighed in his heart. Miss Dugu, do you still remember that I still owe you a good knife? Jun Mo Xia said with a smile as he calmly sat down. Chapter 146. As soon as this matter was brought up, Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly forgot to question him about the matter of him fainting. She pursed her lips and said, You bad guy, you cheated me of my meteorite. Of course, you have to compensate me with a good knife. She paused and then fiercely said, if this knife isn't good enough, and I'm not satisfied with it, then it doesn't count. Her words were said fiercely, but the little girl's face was flushed. After all, as a girl, this was the first time that she had accepted a gift from a boy. Moreover, she was afraid that he wouldn't give it to her. Mosie's products are all exquisite. I guarantee that you'll be satisfied. June Moxie smiled and stood up. He walked into the room and turned around. He held a sheathed knife in his hand and walked out. This knife had an elegant arc and was as thin as a cicada's wing. It looked as light as a feather in June Moxie's hand. But, it gave people a completely different feeling. There was a kind of dignified and thick feeling. This formed an extreme contrast with its light and elegant appearance. It gave people a very contradictory feeling even though it was still in the sheath. Dugu Xiaoyi liked it as soon as she saw it. Her big eyes blinked as she waited for June Moxie to introduce it to her. June Moxie looked at Dugu Xiaoyi. He held the knife hilt and slowly pulled it out. The knife didn't make any sound when it was unsheathed. There was only a flash of light. June Moxie's hand seemed to have a shiny water belt. The knife's body seemed to be moving like the Milky Way. It was sparkling and moving. The knife's body was flat, but the light on it seemed to have its own consciousness. It was floating back and forth. Hidden knife in red sleeve. June Moxie gently stroked the back of the knife with his fingers and said, therefore, this knife is called red sleeve. My body is in Tianxiang, so it is called red sleeve Tianxiang. This knife is the first famous knife that I have made in my life. Therefore, it is named Red Sleeve Tianxiang's first knife. Red Sleeve Tianxiang's first knife. What a nice name. Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes lit up. She stared at the knife in June Moxie's hand eagerly, wishing she could snatch it. How could that ugly big rock compare to this cute knife? It seemed like it was the right decision for the extraterrestrial meteoric iron to fall into June Moxie's hands. The curvature, length, and weight of this dagger are all made according to the requirements of the hidden blade hidden in one's sleeve. Take a look and see if it fits. June Moxie handed over the knife. So beautiful. Is it really for me? Dugu Xiaoyi held the saber in front of her eyes, fiddling with it over and over again, unable to put it down. After a while, he held the saber in his arms and tilted his head slightly, looking at June Moxie with an expectant expression. Of course. Does Miss Dugu not like it? June Moxie looked at her with a faint smile. Of course I like it. Dugu Xiaoyi lowered her head shyly, but you're giving me such a good knife, and I don't have anything to give you. This is what I owe you. You don't have to return the favor. June Moxie almost laughed. This little girl is really naive and cute. Let's do it this way. Dugu Xiaoyi bit her lips. It seemed as if she had made up her mind about something. She slowly pulled a thin thread from her neck, and a small sparkling and translucent jade pendant fell into her hand. I'll give you this. Dugu Xiaoyi lowered her head. Her toes unconsciously tapped on the ground, and her voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Good. June Moxie accepted it with a clear conscience. This killer with an incomparably low EQ didn't think about the special meaning of this gift. He just felt that with his own skills, creating a knife that could be called the best in this world was not something that a small jade pendant could exchange for. With his own creation, this knife did not have to worry about the resistance of the wind when used. Moreover, because of the curve of the blade, it would not produce any wind when used, making it extremely hidden. It was really the best choice for a woman to use a knife. Moreover, it was extremely sharp and tough. With such a knife, even if he received this jade pendant, it would be a matter of course. In fact, this gift in return was much lighter, this jade pendant, you. Dugu Xiaoyi saw June Moxie take it and casually put it in his arms. Her heart became even more bashful, and she stammered, not knowing what to say. It's okay, it's also Miss Dugu's kind intentions. Haha, but since Miss Dugu specifically wanted this knife, I'm sure you're very proficient in knife skills? June Moxie smiled. He had only used 1/20th of a piece of meteoric iron to create this knife, and the rest had been turned into small flying knives. In this regard, June Moxie naturally did not have any reluctance. Knife skills? Of course. When Dugu Xiaoyi heard June Moxie say, it's also a kind intention, she could not help but blush, as if her face was glowing, and she was incomparably happy. Hearing June Moxie's question, she could not help but be excited, and said, I'll show you. After saying that, she did not dare to look at June Moxie again. After exchanging that token, if she stood here again, she would really die of embarrassment. She jumped out, waved the knife, and then stepped to the left, the knife moving with her, silver light surrounding her body. Although this knife was also made using ordinary methods, but under the operation of June Moxie's art of unlocking heaven's fortune, Dugu Xiaoyi only felt that the knife was incomparably compatible with her small hand, as if her arm had inexplicably grown a section. She could control it with ease, and it was a very ordinary knife skill, impenetrable by wind and rain, extremely wonderful. June Moxie only watched a few moves, and sighed. Ever since he saw June Wui and June Zhantian practice, he knew that this world paid far more attention to Xian Qi than to the ingenious changes in moves. Naturally, as long as there was enough Xian Qi, it was very possible to break 10 moves with one move. In the face of absolute power, any ingenious move would be vulnerable. Think about it, would a Supreme Shen Xian need to use any special moves to attack a silver-leveled Xian Qi practitioner? And this habit also created the iron rule, those below the 9th-leveled Xian Qi are all ants. However, no matter which world, if two people with similar Xian Qi were to fight, the rules of moves would definitely be a very important method, and could easily determine life and death. Especially for a girl like Dugu Xiaoyi, if she were to compete with others in strength, it was simply courting death. Women's strength was naturally weaker than men, but this was something that could not be helped. Like a cow chewing on a peony. June Moxie sighed, letting Dugu Xiaoyi hear it clearly, such a good knife, but you use this kind of knife skill, it's simply a waste of heaven's gift. You said that my knife skill is not good? Dugu Xiaoyi put away her knife, and stood upright, looking at June Moxie with her big bright eyes. How should I put it, it's not your own problem, but the way you use the knife is too rigid. June Moxie unceremoniously took the knife from Dugu Xiaoyi's hand, took a step forward, and swung the knife diagonally. With a tremble, 3 to 4 knife flowers appeared, and while protecting himself, it also covered the area 5 feet in front of him. If there was an enemy in front of him, just this move alone was enough to make them retreat. June Moxie wielded the knife very slowly, because he could not infuse Xian Qi into the knife, and could not use the mysterious power of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. But when June Moxie used it like this, his posture became more and more elegant, like the floating clouds and flowing water, continuous and continuous. What a beautiful knife skill! Dugu Xiaoyi applauded, and her eyes could not help but show a trace of desire. This is the red sleeve knife skill. The first move, red sleeve light wave. June Moxie stopped, smiled, and said, the red sleeve knife has a total of 9 moves, the red sleeve knife dance soul vanishes. It can be said to be a first-class knife skill, do you want to learn it? Of course I want to. Dugu Xiaoyi happily jumped in front of June Moxie, quickly teach me. As she spoke, because the two were too close, the hot breath from her mouth blew on June Moxie's face, with an inexplicable fragrance. Coupled with the virgin fragrance of Dugu Xiaoyi, June Moxie suddenly inhaled it, and could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. He could not help but fall back, and then immediately thought, teach me then, what am I afraid of? Then he turned back. Dugu Xiaoyi saw his face blushing, and was very amused. She did not expect that this famous playboy in Tianxiang would actually blush because of a woman. Thinking of this, her heart was even more tempted to tease him, and she aggressively moved forward, and was about to open her mouth to speak. At this moment, June Moxie's body suddenly turned back, and in a split second, both of them were stunned. 4 pairs of lips were tightly pressed together, and 4 eyes were staring at each other in astonishment. Dang! The knife in Dugu Xiaoyi's hand fell to the ground, and her whole body seemed to be in a fog. Even her thoughts seemed to have stopped at this moment, and her body stiffened. Unexpectedly, she did not know how to dodge. As soon as June Moxie turned back, he suddenly felt a sweet and fragrant softness on his lips. He did not have time to think, and his tongue subconsciously licked it. It was quite tasty, and he could not help but lick it again. Dugu Xiaoyi screamed, and her beautiful face instantly turned red, and then became fiery red. In a split second, her entire body became hot, and even her jade-like neck became bright red. Covering her face with both hands, she squatted down on the ground, and breathed heavily, but did not make a sound. He kissed me. Dugu Xiaoyi's mind was a mess. He gave me a knife, took my jade pendant, and then, kissed me. This was an accident, really just an accident. June Moxie awkwardly spread out his hands, and subconsciously stuck out his tongue to lick his upper lip, and then his lower lip, a little embarrassed. He was teaching his female disciple with the appearance of a highly respected master, but who knew that in the blink of an eye, he would turn into a rogue, even though it was unintentional. Little White saw June Moxie sticking out his tongue, and could not help but feel excited. With a swoosh, it jumped onto June Moxie's body, and with a smack, it kissed him on his upper lip, followed by another smack, and did the same to his lower lip. Damn! I was actually molested by a mystical beast, this little thing. June Moxie hurriedly grabbed it and threw it away. With such a scene, the trace of charm and gentleness in his heart suddenly disappeared. Miss Dugu, you quickly get up. Squatting down and covering your eyes, how are you going to learn the knife skill? June Moxie kindly said. Chapter 147. Damn, what did I do to you? June Moxie scratched his head. Then how should I address you? Humph. You know it in your heart. Dugu Xiaoyi wanted to stamp her feet. I've never seen such a blockhead. I know. June Moxie frowned and thought hard. Suddenly, he clapped his hands together. Dugu Xiaoyi's body trembled and she couldn't help but move her fingers away from her eyes. She looked at him with a shy, happy, and expectant expression. June Moxie understood. That's right, our relationship is different now. I'm teaching her, this is a master-disciple relationship. He couldn't help but put on a stern face and put on the posture of a teacher. Little girl, my disciple, get up quickly. Master will teach you the exquisite knife skills. Teach your head. Dugu Xiaoyi jumped up angrily and stepped on his foot. She couldn't help but step on his foot a few more times and said hatefully, whose master are you? Who is your disciple? Humph. June Moxie was caught off guard. He didn't expect this disciple to be so rebellious. He gritted his teeth and said, you must respect your master. Respect your head. Respect your head. You think you're not a debauchee just because you know a few knife skills. Let me tell you, don't think that you're not a debauchee just because you know how to play with knives, and you're not a prodigal just because you pretend. You big bad guy. Dugu Xiaoyi flew into a rage out of humiliation. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws, ready to pounce on him. Too infuriating. Too infuriating. This big bad guy. This pig head. This unromantic pig head. You're really unreasonable. How am I a debauchee? How am I a big bad guy? June Moxie was flabbergasted. He said resentfully. This is a huge injustice. Those debauches were obviously done by the previous MOCA. I was the hero who saved the June family from the brink of collapse. I didn't do anything bad. I really don't know what this girl is thinking. I just helped you level up your whitey, gave you a good saber, and even taught you a high-tier saber technique, but you're still so cruel to me. Didn't I just accidentally kiss you? Besides, I didn't do it on purpose. I don't know if it was your first kiss, but it was my standard first kiss. It was my first kiss in both of my lives. If we really have to talk about who's at a disadvantage, it's me who's at a disadvantage. Wait, suffer a loss. Could it be that just a kiss just now made her feel like she had suffered a loss and wanted to repay him with her body? June Moxie shuddered. That won't do. Most girls develop early. This brother's body is only 16 years old. I'm still a minor. You can't destroy the flowers of the motherland. Besides, I haven't had enough of the carefree days of being single. Hurry up and teach me that saber technique. Weren't you bragging about your saber technique just now? Dugu Xiaoyi stomped her feet angrily and bit her lips. She wanted to fling her sleeves and leave, but she really couldn't bear to do so. It wasn't easy to get a chance to see him. Moreover, it was accompanied by 7 brothers. When will we meet again? But this blockhead. Thinking of this, Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly wanted to cry. This bastard, he kissed me. Even my parents haven't kissed me before. Oh, this is a big loss. He's the world's #1 debauchee. He must have kissed many girls. It's definitely not the first time. Dugu Xiaoyi was actually thinking about these things. A girl's feelings were indeed not something that ordinary people could understand. I'll teach you just because you want me to. Do you think I owe you anything? June Moxie rolled his eyes. His words made Dugu Xiaoyi almost die of anger. She stared at him. Suddenly, her eyes turned red. Tears started to fall from her eyes as she whimpered. You bully me. Her heart was filled with endless grievance. This bastard kissed me, accepted my jade pendant, and then he's actually yelling at me. I'm about to leave, and he's still yelling at me. Doesn't he know that a girl needs to be coaxed? Sigh. June Moxie sighed and felt powerless. Heavens! Why is this chick so hard to please? It seemed that the hitman June had lived 2 lives. His experience was very, very extensive. However, he was completely clueless when it came to coaxing a girl. Little White stood in the middle of the two at a loss. He looked from one to the other. It seemed that these two were in conflict. But who should I help? The little guy couldn't make up his mind. Boo-hoo. I'm going to look for the 3rd uncle. I'm going to look for Grandpa June. I'm going to tell them that you bullied me. Boo. I hate you. I hate you. Dugu Xiaoyi covered her face and started to walk away. June Moxie hastily pulled her back. Aunt, what do you want? I was wrong, okay. This was the first time in his 2 lives that the hitman June had admitted his mistake. Let go. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Why are you pulling me like this? Dugu Xiaoyi puffed her cheeks as she tilted her head. June Moxie was somewhat speechless. Last time, it was just a rumor, and your 7 brothers immediately came knocking on my door. If you go out crying this time, maybe your grandfather will personally send an army to come knocking on my door. God, why is my life so bitter? Aunt, I'll teach you. June Moxie begged for mercy. How could he not bow his head when he was under the eaves? Humph. Dugu Xiaoyi snorted, you're sensible. Suddenly, she realized that June Moxie's big hand was still grabbing her arm. She couldn't help but blush, and her whole body started to itch. She didn't know whether it was uncomfortable or comfortable. She couldn't help but whisper, you let go of me. Her voice was unexpectedly soft and bashful. June Moxie let go of her hand and couldn't help but grab his hair. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with this girl today. In just a few short breaths, her mood had changed back and forth 5 or 6 times. What happened to her valiant attitude? Was she in disguise? June Moxie was a newbie in the field of love. He couldn't understand why the little girl's mood changed so much. So fast. No wonder people often say that women are the most difficult animals to understand in the world. This is not a lie. Ahem, watch carefully. The red sleeve knife technique has 9 moves. Jun Mo Xia lifted the red sleeve dagger and held it close to his elbow. The first move, red sleeve light wave. Jun Mo Xia wanted to quickly finish teaching the red sleeve dagger and send this little witch away as soon as possible. Anyway, it wasn't a profound martial art, it was just a set of dagger techniques. But leaving this lass here was simply too torturous. The second move, red sleeve fragrance. The third move, red sleeve like a dream. Red sleeve clouds, red sleeve dancing wind, red sleeve falling thunder, red sleeve lightning, red sleeve dreams, red sleeve heaven and earth. Dugu Xiaoyi's talent in martial arts was very good, and she was also very intelligent. So, it only took her an hour to memorize the entire set of saber techniques. Jun Mo Xia continued to give her pointers and correct her posture. He thought that she would be able to master it in a short while, but unexpectedly, the more Dugu Xiaoyi practiced, the more confused she became. She had already learned most of it, and was even able to use it properly. But, in the end, she was completely out of tune. Even a very simple posture was wrong. Jun Mo Xia had to step forward and correct her. Naturally, some physical contact was unavoidable. Jun Mo Xia's physical strength was quite good. But, he was still drenched in sweat after being tormented by this little girl. On the other hand, Dugu Xiaoyi was in high spirits. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were moving, and she was panting tenderly. If one were to look at Jun Mo Xia's appearance, it would seem like he was a laborer who was powerlessly working, and would die from exhaustion. But if one were to look at Dugu Xiaoyi's appearance, it would seem like a pair of children flirting with each other. It would seem like a beautiful scene. However, Jun Mo Xia's emotional quotient was extremely close to 0. So, he simply didn't think about it. Instead, he kept complaining in his heart, "I'm too stupid. More stupid than a pig. How long do I have to teach her?" Suddenly, a deafening roar of cannons was heard outside. Then, there was the sound of officials moving out to clear a path. The orderly footsteps of a large group of people could be heard. What happened? Both of them were startled at the same time. They stopped involuntarily. Jun Moxie wiped the sweat from his face and let out a sigh of relief. He felt strange in his heart, "I almost couldn't hold on, so how is this girl able to hold on? Could it be that this little girl is also hiding her strength?" It doesn't look like it. He did not know that the intelligent Dugu Xiaoyi had already memorized the entire set of bladesmanship the second time. She had deliberately made mistakes. Dugu Xiaoyi did not feel tired during the whole process. Instead, her heart was filled with the shyness and happiness of flirting with her sweetheart. She had already evolved the process of teaching the bladesmanship into a happy experience. Since it was a happy experience, how could it be tiring? It seems that a different state of mind really does affect one's stamina. The imperial teacher of Yutang, Fei Mengchen, has come to visit Tianxiang today. A large group of people has already arrived outside Tianxiang city. Jun Wui was sitting in a wheelchair. He was pushed out by Dugu Ying. Yutang's #1 general, Zhao Jianhun, has also come. His Majesty has already sent the Crown Prince to welcome him into the city. When he said the 3 words, Zhao Jianhun, Jun Wui's eyes flashed, and his tone was quite strange. In addition, the Xinxia Empire's #1 Xian Qi Grandmaster, Shi Changshao, has also arrived today. His Majesty has also sent the 2nd prince to welcome him. As for the 3rd prince, he is in the city preparing for the arrival of the emissaries. Jun Wui said lightly. His Majesty's arrangements can be said to be quite outstanding. Jun Moxie praised. The Emperor clearly knows that these two emissaries have ulterior motives, but he has sent the three princes to receive them separately. This shows that the Emperor's intentions are very deep. His Majesty is testing his blade again. Jun Wui smiled faintly. If nothing unexpected happens, the successor to the throne should be chosen after the incident in the capital city. Jun Moxie was somewhat puzzled and asked, "Why is that?" Chapter 148. Jun Wui's eyelids drooped as he spoke in an indifferent tone. Deep down, he was reveling in the process of dispelling his nephew's doubts. After all, Jun Dashao had been too domineering during this period of time. As his uncle, he had always acted according to his wishes, and it was rare for him to dispel his doubts. Let's go and join in the fun. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes as he thought, the three princes aren't good people. No matter which one of them becomes the emperor, it won't be a good thing. At least, it won't be a good thing for the Jun family. Damn it. I might as well kill them all. The 7 brothers of the Dugu family were eager to see the world in chaos. So, they cheered in unison. Dugu Xiaoyi smiled sweetly and nodded. She held Xiao Bai in her arms and suddenly moved closer to Jun Moxie's ear. She whispered, "Is it your secret that we fainted? I won't tell anyone, and I won't ask you about it." "I understand." Then, she paused for a moment and continued, "But, when you feel that you can tell me, will you tell me?" Jun Moxie turned his head in surprise and looked at Dugu Xiaoyi. The little girl's eyes were full of shyness and affection. But, the expression in her eyes was firm, "I won't harm you, and I won't make things difficult for you." These words could be clearly read from her eyes. In that instant, Jun Moxie felt his heart soften. His eyes warmed up and he gently patted Dugu Xiaoyi's hair. But, he didn't say anything. There was no need to say anything. Slap. Jun Moxie's hand was slapped to the side. Dugu Chung glared at him and shouted, "Boy, don't try to take advantage of my little sister. Do you think it's so easy to take advantage of my little sister? If you do this again, I won't say anything else. I'll chop off your hand." Jun Mo Xia had managed to raise a trace of warmth with great difficulty. But, this slap had completely dissipated Jun Mo Xia. Dugu Xiaoyi looked at his strange expression and couldn't help but chuckle. She looked at him apologetically. The group followed the crowd and came to the main street. Dugu Ying and his brothers deliberately prevented Jun Moxie from coming into contact with their sister. They weaved left and right, walking very fast. However, Jun Moxie fell right into his trap. After putting some distance between them, he turned around and disappeared without a trace. The little lass looked around for Jun Moxie, but she couldn't find him. She turned around and threw a tantrum at her 7 brothers. Little White had already snuggled into her arms and was fast asleep. The previous advancement seemed simple, but the process was actually quite difficult. It really made this little thing quite tired. At this moment, the excitement was gone, and it naturally fell into a deep sleep. Jun Moxie successfully blended into the crowd and couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. He walked forward aimlessly. Although he was walking aimlessly, he was happier than before because he no longer had the little girl to hold him back. Jun Mo Xia didn't realize that the little girl Dugu had already implanted her image into the hitman's heart. Although his impression of her wasn't necessarily good, but it had left a deep imprint on him. "So it's really you, boy. Haha, last time you scolded me and ran away. Fate has brought us together, but today you won't be able to run away." A familiar voice sounded from the left side of Jun Dashao. Jun Moxie turned his head and saw a middle-aged man walking towards him with a smile on his face. He was followed by 2 bodyguards. The middle-aged man stretched out his hand to pat Jun Moxie's thin and weak shoulders. The former Jun Mo Sia could be said to have indulged in the 5 poisons of eating, drinking, whoring, and perverting the 5 poisons. He had turned his originally weak and frail body into an abnormal trash. It would be an exaggeration to say that he was strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Hitman Jun had used the Hung Jun Pagoda and the art of unlocking the heaven's fortune to repair and temper his body. Although the essence of his body had become very different, but the external appearance didn't seem to have changed much. In fact, there wasn't much difference between his body and that of a debauchee of the past. Jun Mo Sia dodged backwards and dodged the man's hand. The hitman wasn't used to strangers touching his body, so he didn't immediately retaliate. So, he raised his eyebrows and said, "So it's you." Although it was only a glimpse, Jun Dashao was an ultimate assassin. He quickly recalled that this man was the one he had met in the store that day when it was raining on the Mid-Autumn Festival. It was also on that day that Jun Moxie had coincidentally obtained the level 9 Xian Dan. And now, the level 9 Xian core had attracted the attention of many powerhouses from all over the world, and they had arrived in Tianxiang one after another. And now, they had coincidentally met him again. Jun Dashao couldn't help but sigh. It wasn't just the Earth that was round. Every planet was round, that's me. The middle-aged man didn't seem offended by Jun Mo Sia's resistance. He smiled and said, "A wanderer who has fallen to the ends of the earth. Little brother, we meet again. It can be said that we are brought together by fate." Jun Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The word, brought together by fate, had been used exclusively to tease Dugu Xiaoyi. However, he hadn't expected that it would be used on him. This made Jun Moxie feel as if he was being teased. It would have been better if that person had been a woman. But it was a middle-aged uncle. No, a young man wasn't good either. It's fate that we met. But, when did I curse you? Jun Moxie was somewhat puzzled. He had never inadvertently forgotten the things that he had experienced. Although he wasn't in a good mood that day, but he definitely hadn't cursed anyone. Humph. You little brat, you still want to act shamelessly. You cursed this old man in a roundabout way before you left. Do you really think that this old man didn't hear it? The middle-aged man laughed. 1,000 cups is too little when drinking with a bosom friend. Aren't these words cursing me? Moreover, no one in this world is worthy to drink with you at the same table. These words are clearly saying that I'm not qualified enough. Isn't this cursing? Humph. Jun Moxie hiccuped twice and stared at this old man, in front of him. No matter how he looked at it, he didn't look more than 40 years old. How dare he call himself an old man? Wasn't the old man of this world too worthless? In his 30s, or at most 40, he called himself an old man. Isn't this a little too strange? Are you finally willing to admit it? The middle-aged man smiled slyly. If you really feel apologetic, then take out the heavenly wine that you mentioned the other day as an apology. How about that? Jun Moxie was dumbfounded. There was actually such a person. Even a lion wouldn't be so ruthless, right? He couldn't help but roll his eyes and said, "Why do I have to apologize? But your shameless appearance is quite similar to my style in the past." Ahem. The middle-aged man choked on his words. After thinking for a long time, he laughed, as expected of a scholar. You really don't use any vulgar words when you curse. But, little brat, how old are you? How dare you call yourself in the past, in front of this old man? 10 years can be compared to the past, and 1 year can also be compared to the past. The next time I see a 7 or 8-year-old child, I will also call myself an old man. Think about what happened in the past. Who can't say it? Jun Moxie snorted and said. Ha ha ha, forget it, I won't tease you anymore. Come, accompany me for a drink. The middle-aged man laughed heartily and was about to hold Jun Dashao's hand. You know who I am. Why did you casually drag me to drink with you? Jun Moxie frowned. We just met by chance. After a drink, we go our separate ways. Why do I need to know who you are? The middle-aged man smiled strangely. You said that. But I said that it was fate that we met. Since it is fate, why can't we drink a few cups together? You're awesome. June Moxie gave him a thumbs up. You actually remember it so clearly. I find that I really can't talk nonsense in front of you. June Moxie suddenly felt that this guy's way of talking was actually quite to his liking. It seemed that this was the first time that he had met a bosom friend since his reincarnation. June Moxie couldn't help but feel quite interested. In fact, the hitman June didn't have many friends in his previous life. An assassin is always lonely. Are you waiting to see the country's master Fei Mengchen enter the city? The middle-aged man smiled reservedly. Yes and no. I just thought that it would be very lively in a while. So, I came to see if it's the country's master from another country. It's just for the fun of it. June Moxie smiled. Watch the fun. Well said. In the end, it's just an old bastard from an enemy country and a bunch of little bastards with ulterior motives. Let's just watch a monkey show. The middle-aged man chuckled. No matter how welcoming he is now, no matter how enthusiastic he is, when the time comes for the two armies to face each other, he definitely won't show any mercy. Welcome my ass. He doesn't come when he wants to, he doesn't leave when it's time to leave, and now he's holding such a grand welcoming ceremony. Whether the country's master will come or not is none of our business. The middle-aged man snorted as if he was extremely dissatisfied with this matter. Well said. June Moxie applauded. This speech alone is enough for me to drink 2 cups of wine. Is it the wine that you said is 100 times stronger than Old Song's wine? The rare and exceptional wine in this world? The middle-aged man's words were full of ridicule. It was clear that in his mind, this wine was not only rare but absolutely non-existent. June Moxie tilted his head, snorted, and said, I don't want to argue with an ignorant person like you. Facts always speak louder than words, and justice is in the hearts of the people. The middle-aged man laughed heartily, and didn't argue any further. Instead, he pulled June Moxie away. On the other side of the city gate, the crown prince had already received the Yutang Empire's master. Dozens of horses were lined up side by side, and the imperial guards were lined up on both sides. In the middle of the group was the high-spirited crown prince, who was riding a horse beside him. From time to time, he would smile and talk with the imperial tutor Fei Mengchen, who was riding a horse beside him. The imperial tutor seemed to be talking with a smile on his face, as if he was introducing the scenery of Tianxiang City to the imperial tutor. The middle-aged man turned around and saw the crown prince's expression and actions. He sighed, shook his head, and turned away. June Moxie was led by the middle-aged man into a small alley. He turned left and right, and found that the terrain was very familiar. It seemed that he had arrived at Old Song's tavern. June Moxie looked at the middle-aged man's attire, and thought that he should be someone with some status, right? How could he be so familiar with these small alleys? Old Song, I've caught that brat from last time for you. Haha, hurry up and get me the good wine you promised me. June Moxie heard these words and the tone of these words, and suddenly felt as if he had been sold. This posture was similar to that of an assassin holding the head of his employer's enemy to offer a reward. Chapter 149. It's like this, Old Song loves wine as much as his life. Apart from drinking, his only hobby is making wine. Unfortunately, his wine is the best in the entire Tianxiang. That day, after listening to your fallacious argument, he actually appreciated it and became a close friend of the wine nation. Every day, he would say that he wanted to see you again, so this old man decided to fulfill his wish. Ha ha ha, while at the same time, he gambled 3 jars of good wine. The middle-aged man rubbed his hands, and didn't look embarrassed or embarrassed. Instead, he looked as if his conspiracy had succeeded. June Moxie was speechless. Ever since he came to this world, he had always been the one taking advantage of others and using them. But today, he was actually used by someone, and he didn't even see the slightest trace of it. What kind of story was this? Don't mock me, what a great shame. June Sunshaw's hair stood up in anger. This enmity must be avenged. You old man, wait for this young master to properly treat you, and let you know why the flowers are so red. How am I supposed to avenge him? A thin and small old man with a stooped body came out in 3 steps. He laughed loudly and said, "Honored guests, honored guests. I was wondering why I heard magpies chirping. Turns out there are 2 honored guests at the same time. Young master, it was a pity that we didn't get the chance to meet last time, but today, we finally have the opportunity to meet again. Please, please, quickly come in." Although he said that they were 2 honored guests, his words had already filtered out the middle-aged man, and he didn't even have the intention to let him pass. The middle-aged man didn't know whether it was because he was thick-skinned, or because he didn't feel offended. As for his 2 bodyguards, they disappeared as soon as they entered the store, presumably hiding in the dark. June Moxie was startled. The moment this old man came out, he gave him a very familiar feeling. Looking at his figure and face, June Moxie couldn't help but feel strange. He entered the store with a smile, but his heart was secretly paying attention. That day, I heard young master's wise words. You said, when you drink wine, you drink your mood and mood. It doesn't mean that you pour the wine into your stomach. Even if you drink wine, it can only be said to be a waste of food. These words have resonated deeply with me. Old Song poured tea for the guests and chattered on. This old man has been brewing wine for dozens of years. In the art of brewing wine, I often boast that no one in the world can surpass me. But half of my life, I have been a fly and a dog, and now I am being trampled upon by the common people. Now that I think about it, it's really lamentable. That's right, it really is a waste of food. Even today, I still say the same thing. June Moxie snorted. He looked at the middle-aged man who did not treat him as an outsider and took out the wine jars himself. Ha, but in young master's opinion, how can it not be considered as a waste of food? Old Song's old eyes lit up as he asked with a humble expression. What is wine? June Moxie asked. Why do people love wine in the first place? Why do they like wine? What is wine? Song Laosan asked himself. He was a bit confused. He claimed to be a winemaker for his entire life, but what exactly is wine? That one question had actually stumped him. To say that wine is just a drink. It would be too unfair to wine. But what is it other than that? Wine is the mood. June Moxie emphasized, therefore, drinking wine is actually drinking the mood. When one is in a good mood and is doing things smoothly, drinking wine to celebrate is called celebration wine. When one is depressed, drinking wine to drown one's worries is called sorrow wine. When a good friend comes to visit, it is called bosom friend wine. When a good friend sees him off, it is called sad farewell wine. When soldiers fight on the battlefield, it is called strong blood wine. When killing the enemy, it is called killing wine. The taste of the wine is secondary. The mood before drinking is the true taste of the wine. June Moxie poured a cup and drank it in one gulp. With a lonely expression, he said, when one is alone in a foreign land, wandering and uncertain, drinking wine at this time is called homesickness wine. When one is alone in a foreign land, drinking wine to drown one's worries is more worrying. Good poem, good poem. Brilliant theory, brilliant theory. Young master is truly a genius. The middle-aged man and Old Song were already fascinated by Chu Yang's words. After a while, Old Song came to his senses and praised Chu Yang again and again. Brilliant theory? What is brilliant theory? June Moxie sneered. There are 3 classes of people in wine. What I have said is true drinking. It is all about following one's heart. With the help of wine, one can taste the different flavors of life. This is the upper class of people in wine. When the upper class drinks, 10,000 people can taste 10,001 different flavors. This is because of the different states of mind. There is no wealth or poverty in wine. There is no distinction between beggars and high officials. If one knows how to drink and drink with one's heart, then one is a wine expert. If one cannot drink according to one's heart, and even before drinking, one must test one's knowledge of wine appreciation and tasting, and finally taste the wine, then this is simply a game for scholars. Compared to the true way of wine, it is simply putting the cart before the horse. It is the biggest joke in the world. Therefore, drinking for the sake of tasting and appraising wine, and even using wine to compete with one's own knowledge, is of a lower class. But drinking in this way, although it is not the same as drinking wine, it has an additional sense of elegance. Although it cannot be considered as a disgrace to wine, one can only reluctantly be considered a wine expert. But with the word hypocrite in it, so one cannot be considered a true wine gentleman. June Moxie said. The middle-aged man and Old Song's eyes flashed with a strange light. They wanted to open their mouths to say something, but they restrained themselves and patiently listened to what June Dashao had to say. However, the 2 of them were secretly laughing in their hearts. This young man's words, the words true and hypocrite, were very obvious. It was as if he was saying that those sour scholars were all hypocrites. Anyone would be able to discern the hidden meaning in his words. June Moxie squinted his eyes. His attitude was wild as he continued, apart from the above 2, the next level is more conventional. Whether it be in the brothel, drinking and socializing in the pub, or chatting with friends in a luxurious mansion, or competing over wine tables in the political arena, all of them are scheming and plotting against each other. So, they are the lowest level of people in the world of wine. As for those who use wine to harm others, those who harbor evil intentions, they are a waste of wine, and are not worthy of being discussed by me. The middle-aged man and Old Song listened to June Moxie's brilliant words, and nodded slightly. Then, they became silent, and felt a faint sense of pride in their hearts. I've been a wine enthusiast for decades. So, I should be considered a true wine gentleman, right? Who would have thought that June Dashao would say something even more shocking? He pointed at the 2 of them and lightly shook them. Based on the 2 of you, perhaps you can barely be considered a lower class. Nonsense. The 2 of them were finally enraged and shouted at the same time. You should know that these 2 people are confident that they are the experts of the wine nation. Your theory may be reasonable, but with our decades of experience in the way of wine, how could you use the word barely to be evaluated as a second-grade wine? This is too much of a bully. Seeing that the 2 of them were enraged, June Dashao didn't seem to care and continued, don't be unconvinced when I say that you can barely be considered a lower class. You have been immersed in the Tao of wine for decades, and this experience cannot be denied. But to taste wine, to appraise wine, to enjoy wine, and to drink wine for the sake of it, there is another condition. That is, you must have qualified wine. Not only have you not tasted such wine, you have not even seen it before. Just this knowledge alone is enough to make you inferior. June Moxie stretched out his little finger and gently shook it. However, I can't blame you for this. I believe that no one else in this world has this kind of wine besides me. Old Song, your wine can be said to be the best in the entire Tianxiang Empire. But when compared to the wines I know, the wines I have spoken about, and the wines I have tasted, the difference is like the difference between the heavens and the earth. It is impossible to compare them in the same breath. These words were somewhat sophistry, but he had already begun to promote his wine. Young master, when it comes to wine, it is true that you speak of gold and spit out jade, which has opened my eyes. However, when it comes to wine making, I, Old Song, have traveled all over the world. I can say this bluntly, if my wine can't be tasted, then I'm afraid that there is no wine in the world that can enter your eyes. Old Song wasn't happy that Jun Mo had said that he wasn't qualified, and now that he had heard the last few words, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. He wasn't convinced. This old man has been immersed in the art of wine for a lifetime, and I dare say that I have tasted all the best wines in the world. But looking at the best wines in the world, I don't think any of them can be compared to this old man's secret wine. But this little devil dares to say that your wine is like the difference between the heavens and the earth? How could Old Song not be angry? But this wasn't an exaggeration, and it was up to Jun Dashao to refute. The world was vast, and it wasn't necessarily that there wasn't a better wine in the world, or that he didn't know about it. Compared to Jun Dashao's words, the whereabouts of the wine was naturally more important. Jun Mo smiled in a noncommittal manner. He didn't refute the sharp words he had spoken earlier. The middle-aged man's ears pricked up as he looked from one to the other. Suddenly, he rolled his eyes and said, "Old Song, there's always someone better out there, and there's always someone better behind the wine. If this little brother can really come up with a wine that's 100 times better than yours, then what would you do?" "Then I'd be willing to take him as my master." Old Song's eyebrows twitched, and his eyes flashed as he blurted out. At this moment, his stooped body suddenly straightened up, and a strong sense of self-confidence and pride burst out of him. In addition to self-confidence and pride, there was also a trace of heartfelt expectation in his eyes. If he could really produce such a good wine, then why not take him as his master? Jun Moxie's heart suddenly stirred, and he was able to confirm Old Song's identity. So it's him. No wonder I felt a sense of déjà vu. The last time he and his third uncle Jun Wui settled the matter of the Huanghua Hall, the uncle and nephew were chased by a mysterious Tian Xian level expert. Although Jun Moxie was able to scare him off with a clever trick, but that person's tyrannical strength was even higher than Jun Wui's, and it was still fresh in Jun Moxie's memory. According to Jun Moxie's judgment, this person's strength was extremely high, and he was even stronger than the Silver Blizzard City's Mu Shuatong and Xiao Han, and was only slightly weaker than his grandfather Jun Zhantian. Who would have thought that the mysterious Tian Xian expert in front of him and the owner of the tavern, Old Song, would have a connection? But just as Old Song unintentionally said those words in a fit of pique, a trace of his aura leaked out due to the fluctuations in his mood. Although this trace of aura was fleeting, but it was enough for Jun Moxie to recognize him, and in an instant, the two figures overlapped in his mind. Just like in a slow-motion movie, the two figures constantly split up, and then recombined. Every movement and every kind of aura was repeated several times in Jun Moxie's mind, and finally, the two figures merged into one. It's him. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.